We'll begin with a roll call. Secretary Elmer, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Alchek, Commissioner Gardias,
Present.
Vice Chair Keller,
Present.
Commissioner King,
Present.
Chair Michael,
Present.
Commissioner Rosenblum,
Present.
Commissioner Tanaka, 6 present.
We can start with oral communications, the part of the meeting when members of the public may speak to any item not on the agenda with 3 minutes per speaker. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, we do. Yes, we have one speaker. It is David Carnahan for the Deputy City Clerk.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm here today to let you guys know, which, well, as you probably already know, we have recruitment going on now for 2 positions on the Planning and Transportation Commission, and we also have 2 positions in the Architectural Review Board and 4 on Historic Resources Board. So I just want to get that out here for you guys to know so that you are aware, and then also members of the public that are at home watching and here in the audience know that an opportunity to apply for those 3 boards and commissions is currently ongoing. We're accepting applications through September 22nd, and we're going to have applications here in the chambers at the back if anyone's interested today. And any questions, they can contact information is there for myself and other folks in the clerk's office. Thank you.
Just a quick question before you go. Since you have the audience watching on TV, keep those cards and letters coming in, folks. Could you please identify briefly what the qualifications are for each of these 3 positions, if you know them?
That is a very nice pop quiz that I cannot answer accurately. I believe these 3 are all Palo Alto residents as a requirement, and unfortunately I can't accurately list the specific qualifications for each of the 3 of them off the top of my head, and I wouldn't want to misrepresent.
I think that the Planning Commission members have to be Palo Alto residents, and I don't think there's any other qualification. For the ARB, 3 out of 5 need to be architects, and I do not believe that they have to be Palo Alto residents. I'm not sure if there's a minimum requirement for residents, and I'm not sure what the requirement is for the HRB.
Yeah, and HRB also has some specific requirements on historical knowledge and various different things. The Architectural Review Board and Historic Resources Board do have rather specific requirements of number of people of different backgrounds and things. So, but we encourage anyone to apply that fits the requirements. And for several of them, there's minimum number of architects, but there's room for other community members that don't have a specific background.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we can now go to the Director's report. Director Gittleman.
Thank you, Chair Michael, members of the Commission. Good evening. Just a few things. First, I wanted to let you know that the City Council had a really constructive conversation about parking garage technologies, among other things, at their meeting on August 18th. And staff did a great job of presenting, a number of ongoing programs, explaining how they fit into the whole big picture, and we got council direction to proceed with an integrated program of parking guidance systems and access and revenue controls for downtown garages. So it was a good step forward. There'll be requests for proposals forthcoming on a number of items to move these different parking-related recommendations forward to the next step. Also wanted you to be aware that in response to the council's request for baseline data to support the comprehensive plan update process, staff is pushing out to the website sometime this weekend existing conditions reports for the 14 topics that will be analyzed in the EIR for the comp plan. So we will send you a link so you can see those on our website, and also make a hard copy and transmit that to the Commission for your use. We don't at this point intend to agendize that for discussion, but it's something that sets a foundation for future work, and it's something we committed to provide to the Council before their next discussion of the comp plan, which has not yet been scheduled, but we expect it to happen in early October. We have scheduled for the Council at their request a discussion on September 8th of the Planning Department's work program items related to traffic, parking, and zoning issues. The council, in their last discussion of the comp plan, wanted this list of ongoing initiatives, presumably so that they could weigh the priority of these against other thoughts that they have related to changes to the commercial zoning regulations. So that discussion will be at the City Council on September 8th. It's a study session that starts at 6 p.m. if any of the commissioners would like to attend. That's all I have to report.
Thank you very much. With that, we can move to the first of the items on our agenda, which is a study session. It concerns traffic signal modifications at Embarcadero Road and the Palo High School Town and Country location. We didn't know exactly how much public participation we might have for this item, but we wanted to make sure that we gave adequate time if there was public comment. But we'd like to get through this in a maximum of 90 minutes, hopefully less than that. So with that, let's turn to staff, and please give us your report.
Good evening, Chair Michael, members of the Commission. My name is Jaime Rodriguez. I'm the Chief Transportation Official for the City of Palo Alto. And with me here is Atul Patel from TJKM Transportation and Consultants. Atul's been helping us prepare the design plans that we've discussed within the staff report and overall helping us complete the design for this project that we're here to talk about tonight. So thanks, Atul, for being here. Let me pull up the presentation real quick. So, I'm going to apologize up front because this is a rather technical discussion. When we're talking about modifying traffic signals, it comes down to very specific kind of operations issues. So before I get into those specific items, I wanted to provide a little bit of an agenda to kind of walk you through what we're going to be discussing tonight. First, I want to talk a little bit about the background, talk about, kind of why we're here, kind of what's been happening at Embarcadero, at Town and Country and Palo, really over the last several years, because there's been a lot of incremental changes over time. And there's been recent changes along the corridor with the construction station happening at Palo Alto High School as part of the construction of their brand new theater. And that is also changing the operations of Embarcadero Road in itself, and then things will probably come back to normal within a year. We also want to share data that we've collected over the past year, kind of discuss a little bit about level of service and operations for the intersections at Town and Country and the Palo Alto High School crossing. And then really, we want to discuss the alternatives of why we're here tonight. We have a series of things we want to present. There's some modifications that we think just need to happen. But the items in red here on the board are the things that we're really looking for input from the Commission and commissioners, as well as anyone that is here in the audience tonight. We want to talk a little bit about the phases of improvements, and I think that's something that we'll spend a little bit of time on because there was a lot of, I think, misinterpretation by a lot of the community as part of our staff report, so I'll apologize up front to anyone at home that misinterpreted the goal of what we were trying to do tonight. And we also want to discuss configuration options for the driveways that serve both Palo Alto High School and Town and Country. That's the meat and potatoes of what we want to get input on tonight, because how we want to see the driveways operate will in turn dictate how Embarcadero Road gets operated. So we want to make sure that we have a really good, healthy discussion around that item, and then talk about some of the next steps and solicit your input on next stages of studies that we want to move forward with. So let's just talk a little bit about the corridor. We're here to talk about 2 of 3 signals in the near term that we want to do some improvements at. The first one here is the traffic signal that services the Town and Country and Palo Alto High School driveways. And then there's a signal immediately to the east that services the Palo Alto High School pedestrian crossing and currently services the Trader Joe's driveway exiting Town and Country. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. But you can't not think about what's happening everywhere else around this area, because there's very few places in Palo Alto where a lot of things converge. This is probably one of the biggest areas where a lot of things happen at one time. And to really complicate the operations of these 2 signals, there's a third signal immediately to the west at El Camino Real, and that signal is operated and maintained by Caltrans, and we don't maintain that signal. That does cause some operations concerns for us. Long term, I think it might be a location that the city will have to have a serious discussion internally and with Caltrans about who should be maintaining that signal in the long run. But in the near term, as part of this kind of near term project, it is a signal that will remain with Caltrans. Right adjacent to the east side of this corridor, there's the Caltrain corridor itself. We're very fortunate that we have that great bicycle pedestrian crossing or trail alignment next to Caltrain. That provides a lot of good options for bicyclists and pedestrians to have a good north-south connection adjacent to the Caltrain line. But it does result in an overstructure crossing of Embarcadero Road that really chokes the road down, and these two gray lines are what represent kind of the underpass scenario that exists in that area. The high school itself generates a lot of traffic in the morning, and it releases a lot of traffic in the mid-afternoon. But we were fortunate enough to be able to partner with the school district and with Palo to make sure they were able to reopen a connection from the Caltrain bike ped trail to the back of Palo. That's something that reopened just this August, a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact. And that's done wonders to make sure that we're getting more bikes and peds off of Embarcadero Road, give them an option to get back onto that trail, to get back to the back of the school. There's, of course, Town and Country. It's an extremely popular regional destination with a lot of traffic during midday and afternoon and weekends, as you'll see in the data that we present shortly. And then you got Stanford University, another regional, if not worldwide destination for a lot of people that are trying to visit our area. And you got PAMP up the street. So there's a lot of things happening along Embarcadero Road for different facilities that are trying to be served. And Embarcadero is one of these few east-west corridors that gives people an immediate opportunity to get to these destinations. We have right to the east, we have a great bicycle boulevard connection along Bryant Street, which is a good north-south connector, but there isn't a good connection from the Bryant Street bicycle boulevard to this area. And within our bicycle boulevard plan, we had to identify Embarcadero Road as a future corridor for some fairly significant bike route improvements. Those, though, are not the topic of our discussion tonight. So I do want to put that out there for you. I think we want to discuss those concerns and take notes so that we can talk about future studies, but it isn't why we're here. But it is a gap because, right to the west of El Camino, there are a great number of existing bicycle facilities that are wonderful on the Stanford campus. There's bike lanes, there's kind of off-road trails, and so this portion of Embarcadero Road is a gap that I don't think anyone is ignoring. So let's talk a little bit about the history, just what's happened over the last several years. Back in 2008, 2009, the city partnered with Town and Country as part of the expansion improvements that facility went through to modify these two traffic signals that we're here to talk about tonight. Specifically, the things that were added as part of those modifications include the signalization of the right turn movement that exits the Trader Joe driveway onto westbound Embarcadero Road. At that same time, there was the median that was constructed on the Town and Country driveway, as well as a median built on the Palo Alto High School driveway. Ironically, here, several years later, we're here back tonight to request that we get input to remove all of those improvements. Those have not proven to be very efficient facilities or conditions for the intersection. And so we've been working with TGK, and I think that it's about time to take those things out because they aren't working. This year alone, we've made some pretty significant changes. We, in the spring, we tried to retime these two signals at the driveways and at the ped cross, and I think we had some good efficiencies at the beginning of the year, but with the changes in operations at the Palo Alto High School driveway, which we'll discuss shortly, we took that coordination out and broke it. But as a part of that, we upgraded the traffic signal control equipment at the signals that exist, and we upgraded the video detection equipment that control how much green time is given to all of the signals. And of course, again, there's the theater under construction driveway changes themselves. There's been a pretty good history of good transit connections to Embarcadero Road. The Palo Alto Shuttle Program provides the Embarcadero Shuttle Service in partnership with Caltrain and provides a route to this area with shuttle stops right at Town and Country and right at Palo Alto High School at the driveways. And Stanford implemented the Stanford Tech Route, which also services this area back in 2012 and continues to do so. Over the last 2 years alone, we've done a number of studies. We looked at trying to get grants through the One Bay Area Grant Program. We're not successful, but we did do some preliminary kind of planning and studies to identify concepts for improving the El Camino Real and Embarcadero Road intersection. Stanford partnered with the city of Palo Alto to do trail improvements along the west side of El Camino Real, and that perimeter trail program is going to be moving forward later this year. Churchill Avenue is currently under study as part of a separate project that the city has with the Sandus Alto planning team. And we presented a staff report to the city council last September, which is really why we're here tonight. Within that staff report, which we'll discuss shortly, we had a very specific series of recommendations which resulted in these signal modifications which we're going to be discussing. And again, this near-term project is that project. And then we want to discuss and solicit input for a larger corridor study that we want to start this fall as well. So I just want to highlight very quickly the changes that have happened at Pali. The solid green route is the route that pedestrians take coming from the Crescent Park area. If they're on the north side of Embarcadero, they're currently being forced to make a little bit of a U-turn and head back towards the Caltrain Trail in the morning times on their way to school. That was a really successful change in the way that the school is managing proactively the operations of the student crossings at the Pali crossing, because them pushing the students to do this U-turn lets that signal stay green longer for the traffic that's on Embarcadero Road. So as a result of that happening, we're able to see more cars trying to turn left into Pali, be able to make that left more efficiently. And it's also a safer condition for the bikes and peds, because they get to get onto that grade-separated bike ped route and enter at the campus at the back of the school. So although we normally don't want to promote, pushing people away from signalized facilities, this is a case where it's a big safety benefit for the community. And again, they avoid the construction staging area, and that construction staging area shows in orange the route that vehicles must take. They have to now enter off of El Camino Real, go to a drop-off in front of the tower building, and then are forced in the morning to not make left turns onto Embarcadero Road, and they loop back around the driveway and exit back on El Camino. So some very good efficiencies that help keep traffic moving on Embarcadero Road. I did want to digress for a second off the project area, because we've had a lot of recent interest from the community regarding improvements along Embarcadero Road, kind of leading to this area, but on the east side of Alma, the Caltrain tracks. And these improvements are actually in process of being constructed. This afternoon, we actually cat-tracked all the new improvements that are being shown on this plan. We're proposing to add a crosswalk across Emerson at Kingsley, just to the north of Embarcadero Road. And that provides a safe routes to school connection for the Crescent Park community trying to get to Pali. So a really long-awaited improvement. A lot of families from Pali requested this type of improvement as part of our Safe Routes to School assessment just last fall, and we're implementing it rather quickly. And we're also going to be adding a pedestrian-activated flashing beacon that lets kids get from Embarcadero Road to that underpath connection that we saw earlier. So we're really excited about these improvements, and these are all going in the month of September. So I want to switch gears kind of back to the project now and talk a little bit about data. This is a kind of a busy slide. In these three major boxes, we're giving you all the bicycle, vehicle, pedestrian data points through the corridor, because a lot of people have asked for this. We wanted to share it. But really what this shows us, it shows us three key findings, and I'm going to kind of walk you through those findings from west to east, starting with the El Camino Real intersection. I want to kind of point you to this kind of one data point here where the cursor is showing the westbound left turn movement from Embarcadero onto El Camino Real, heading south towards California Avenue, the Pageville area. That's got pretty consistently close to 300 vehicles every peak hour trying to turn left. That's from a traffic engineering perspective. It's a very significant data point, because that's an automatic threshold point for us to tell us that no matter what length of a left turn pocket you provide, it's not going to be long enough. You have to have at least 2 left turn lanes, and that's not what we have today. And that's a big complaint from people, that once they try to exit out of Pali, they can never turn left and get into the left turn pocket to turn back onto El Camino Real, because it's always full. And that in turn blocks up Embarcadero Road towards the Pali crossing and back up towards High Street. And so that's a condition that we know exists. This data validates that. And then moving on to the next intersection, we see that we have very consistent heavy east-west volumes along Embarcadero Road. And again, nothing that's a major, data point that isn't expected, but again, we're validating that concern that we're seeing fairly consistently 700 plus vehicles trying to get every peak hour east or west along Embarcadero Road. And at the Pali crossing, this is probably one of the most amazing data points that I've ever seen in my career. I want to just highlight you to the fact that during the lunch hour, we have over 1,500 students from Pali crossing towards Town and Country and back every hour. And that, to us, is a huge number, and it validates part of the existing operation of the Embarcadero Road corridor, in that it makes a lot of sense to keep that pedestrian movement away from the driveways, because if we had pedestrians trying to cross with all those driveways, the driveways would get clogged more than they already are. So it makes a lot of sense to separate them and keep them separated. I just want to quickly highlight level of service. I know that we had some requests from the community to present this data tonight, and we did get a couple of emails from some of the commissioners to show this as well. So starting with level of service at El Camino Real, we do see that we're already at level of service F during the PM peak period, and we're at pretty congested periods of the day at E or D in the morning and in the afternoon. At the town and country driveways and the pet crossings, they aren't as bad as that, but they're definitely impacted. I think part of the reasons why they don't look as bad is because at one point vehicles can't move, so there's just not as much vehicles moving through the corridor. So I would probably say that the data, is probably not as reflective of what the real conditions are in the field. But that's the data that we got because of the capacity moving through the intersection, and that's limited by what vehicles can do at El Camino Real. So let's talk a little bit about the phased improvements. This is kind of being pulled from the staff report that we took to City Council last year. That recommended some very specific improvements to this traffic signal that we want to do, but we're here tonight because we have opportunities to do more, and we thought it was appropriate to solicit your input, give the community an opportunity to also provide us input through this forum. And at a minimum, it makes a lot of sense to try and combine these two signals. These two signals currently operate independently of one another. They have their own traffic signal controller or computer, for lack of a better term if you don't understand that. And those are independent of one another. They're not connected in any way, and they can act independently at times, which can cause a lot of inefficiencies. So I'll just use the example of if a pedestrian pushes the button to cross at the Palo crossing while Town and Country is trying to exit and turn left, you go from waiting to get out of Town and Country and you get stuck again at the traffic signal to the left. And that's one of the number one complaints that we hear. Or coming from Palo Alto towards El Camino Real, people come, they get stuck at the pet crossing, and then because there's no traffic coming towards that intersection because they're stuck at the pet crossing, they move forward, they stop again at the next intersection. So we want to try and find ways to make those two intersections operate more efficiently, and combining them into one traffic signal control makes a lot of sense. But it's a pretty extensive undertaking from the standpoint of a traffic signal design. It's a very complicated operation. It's probably Palo Alto's first signal that I'm aware of that operates under this configuration. But having done stuff over my career, it is a pretty significant change. We also want to remove the traffic signal that currently controls Trader Joe's. That is a movement that isn't very efficient today. Most people don't really comply with the control. They kind of move past the control at one point, and they kind of merge yield into Embarcadero Road, which we'll show you shortly. And we also just want to make some very minor signage and striping improvements along the street. So these are the things that we told the council we wanted to do. And to be honest with you, if we were doing just those, we probably wouldn't really even be here tonight. We'd probably just wrap up the design, put it out to bid, and get it done. But as part of the design and working with TJKM, we identified an opportunity to make this a little bit more efficient as part of the near-term project. And that is where we thought we should let the commission and the community chime in some more. Specifically, it's what do we do with the driveways? The driveway at Town and Country is really one lane, albeit it's a super wide lane that people can maneuver themselves into two lanes already. But in all functionality, it's striped as one lane, and if one person wants to sit in the middle, it blocks the whole driveway, and that does happen. But we have an opportunity to make it 2 or 3 lanes. That'll involve some negotiations with the Town and Country ownership, which we've already started, and they're just kind of waiting for us to make a firm recommendation to them about how we think it should operate. And we also think it's a good idea to make some immediate modifications to at least one of the Pali corners. We can't do both because the other one involves widening, and we haven't had additional discussions with the district. They're supportive of widening, but we haven't gotten into a larger discussion yet. And then we want to talk about phasing with you guys. So just to put it in a little bit more perspective, here's again the corridor with an aerial kind of overlay, El Camino Real, the high school, Town and Country driveways, and the Trader Joe's intersection with the pet crossing. Here's a closer up kind of view without the aerial. And you can see again, coming out of Town and Country, it is just one lane, but it's very wide, but it's 2 coming in. And that's an interesting configuration because you never have more than one movement feeding into Town and Country at any given time. You either have left turns coming in, which means the right turns aren't moving, or you have the right turns coming in, which means the left turns aren't coming in. So you don't really need 2 lanes feeding into Town and Country. 1 is enough. So that's where we can have the discussion. If we take that median and move it over, we can definitely squeeze in a guaranteed 2 lanes, but you really give us the opportunity to provide 3 exiting Town and Country, and we'll show you that shortly. And I do want to just kind of highlight this bump that exists on the existing striping coming from the crossing towards the driveways. This results in a little bit of inefficiencies for the stacking capacity of the Pali left turn, because once you get more than about 5 or 6 cars, anyone that doesn't want to be over that and stacks in this area here, they back up anyone else trying to go through towards Embarcadero, towards El Camino Real. So here's a quick, very busy drawing, but it begins to show you the modification opportunities that exist that are before us today. This configuration up here shows us having a 3-lane configuration at Town and Country. This is one of the 2 options that's discussed within the staff report. This has pluses, but it also has some benefits, but also has some consequences as well. We want to walk you through all those options today. So in this option here, what we're trying to highlight is that this configuration can give us 3 lanes exiting Town and Country. And you can see that we really narrow this down to 1 lane feeding in. This removes that traffic signal facility exiting Town and Country and makes it a stop. Adds in some additional yield markings and signage. That signage aren't shown on the plan, but those will be provided as well. We remove that bump out that we highlighted in the previous slide, and that allows the left turn stacking capacity to Pali to be lengthened an additional 2 to 3 cars before we impact the queues heading west. We're introducing a 24-hour flashing beacon to make people aware that, hey, they're approaching a pit crossing. They should be trying to slow down as they're coming down up towards the intersections. This modification includes trying to realign the heads that are over Embarcadero Road so that they better align with the vehicles that they're controlling. Right now, they're kind of offset towards 1 lane versus the other. This, of course, rebuilds the traffic signal control box and adds a new controller to make this into 1 intersection. And one of the bigger changes here, one of the most probably larger civil improvements that we could do at an early phase, is that we widen out this return so that cars exiting Pali can very comfortably make a right turn and land into that receiving lane here. Today, because it's so sharp, it looks more like this sharp corner here. Cars have to go out of the driveway, really position themselves over the 2 lanes crossing from the west, and then make a sharp right turn towards the corner. And if you look out there, you'll see the curbs are black. Cars have hit it. People have damaged their rims or their tires. And so this would just be a comfortable movement now exiting the Pali driveway, and we'll let people make a comfortable right turn on red. So those are some of the improvements that we want to discuss with you tonight. But it doesn't address all of the concerns that we know the community has. It doesn't address more efficiencies down at the El Camino Real intersection. It doesn't address all of the bicycle pedestrian concerns that we know exist from the bicycling community, from the Safe Routes to School community. And what we want to do is release an RFP, or request for proposals, to bring on a consulting firm to help us identify corridor improvements for Embarcadero Road from El Camino Real up probably towards the Emerson High Street area. And that's our opportunity to really think bigger picture beyond just these smaller improvements. But those will come with a much heftier price tag if we want to look at things like widening Embarcadero Road to put in that double left turn that we talked about earlier towards the south towards California Avenue at El Camino. We can't do that without widening into Pali. Again, Pali, we've had discussions with them already. They're aware that we want to make that type of recommendation. They are so far have been supportive of working with us and are just waiting for getting this process started. And we've had similar discussions with Stanford regarding similar improvements that we could do on the Galvez side of the intersection. And we've already had, again, discussions with Town and Country regarding additional improvements that would happen on their side. But if we did the widening, we can get the double left turn. We would introduce a dedicated right turn lane into Pali from El Camino, going eastbound. We'd actually be able to build out the second half of the Pali driveway and provide that wider return to make the right turns in a lot more smooth as well. I think it would be our opportunity at that point to think about Shero, bicycle lane facilities, multi-use trails to provide a better connection from Stanford at a minimum towards the Caltrain corridor. I don't know that through this process we'll be able to do much to look at widening Embarcadero underneath the Caltrain tracks. I think that has a larger context with high-speed rail or Caltrain electrification. So I think we'll still have that constraint in the foreseeable future regarding the width of Embarcadero Road underneath those tracks. But at least it's an opportunity to begin a discussion with those agencies. And we could then look at repositioning sidewalks and widening sidewalks along the corridor as well. And at the east of the Palo crossing, again, that's the discussion with Caltrain. Oh, actually, let me back up one slide because I did want to highlight one element. Yeah, we had received a couple of recent requests from the community to look at whether or not we needed to either extend or rebuild the existing guardrails that are underneath the Caltrain tracks on Embarcadero Road. I don't know the answer to say that they need to be replaced. There's reasons to build or rebuild guardrails to be ADA compliant, and to improve safety. And that's something that we would normally want to do as part of a larger context study. And so we just want to highlight the fact that we know people in the community are interested in seeing that, but it isn't something that I think we wanted to do as part of this first project, but we know that we want to pay attention to that issue. So this is where we are today. With the signals modifications that we've discussed earlier, this is a design that we will wrap up by October. Our plan would be to put this out to bid and get these improvements built, before the end of spring next calendar year. So these are not very extensive modifications, but especially if we're starting to change traffic signal poles, those are usually 3 to 4 month lead items, and there are things that we can do to buy material ahead of time to make sure we are done with this project by spring. But we want to have that larger community discussion regarding a true corridor planning. And that's something that we also want to begin this fall, but that will take a year, at least 1 year. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that people at home are aware that it isn't something that we'll do right away. There has to be a lot of discussion with the school, with all the different agencies that are involved with real estate interests, and trying to negotiate improvements that can make sense and that are buildable. So that's the end of my presentation, and with that, I'd love to hear your input on the concepts for the signal modifications.
Thank you, Jaime, for your report. Just for the record, Commissioner Alchak is present. He arrived about 6:10. And if any members of the public would like to speak on this topic and submit a speaker card, we have at least one. But if anyone else would like to speak, please do so. And let's begin with members of the public. Vice Chair Keller.
Yes, the first speaker is John Baum, and you'll have 3 minutes, and we'll figure out who the next speaker is in a moment.
Good evening, commissioners and fellow citizens. I'm John Baum. I've lived at 922 El Cajon Way here in Palo Alto since 1971, which adds up to 43 years, more than some people's lifetime, I think. Back when this pedestrian crosswalk was introduced to get between Pali and Town and Country, I realized quite quickly that it was a disaster and that the logical thing was an overpass. And I thought, well, it's too ugly, and a pedestrian overpass would be too ugly and too expensive to request. So I never brought it up. And then one day recently I looked up and I discovered that it had been constructed and introduced very quietly into the community and didn't seem to be being used much. And that it could literally replace that irritating pedestrian crosswalk stoplight just by encouraging Pali students to understand that if they start at the student center and end up at Trader Joe's, it's 100 yards further to walk up to the train tracks and back down to Trader Joe's relative to going up and standing at the stoplight, waiting for it to change and crossing. And odds are they'd save as much time by going up and around as standing at the stoplight and not walking quite as many steps. So I really think that's an important point for your considerations, that we, instead of combining these two signals, we ought to get rid of one of them altogether. And since there's a little bit of time left, the other thing that I noticed on that complicated traffic count slide was that there's a lot of traffic turning right towards Menlo Park off of Embarcadero. And if you restrict right turn traffic and cross into Stanford traffic to one lane, you back up traffic that could clear. And quite frankly, there are times when I see that and I go through Town and Country and bypass the corner because it's such an irritation. Not that it's easy to get through Town and Country. So that's another consideration, is if there's some way that there could be space for 2 or 3 cars to get up and get in, turn right, I think it would help clear that intersection very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. The next speaker is Bob Winslow.
Good evening. My name is Bob Winslow, and I wanted to, let me give you just a little bit of background. I feel challenged by the 3 minutes, so the buzzer will probably hit, and then you'll just wonder what was in my brain. I work at Town and Country, ride my bike to Town and Country basically every day from the Crescent Park neighborhood, and had kids go to Palo, they're done now, and worked on bike safety for a long time in the elementary schools. The point that I wanted to try and emphasize tonight and in the limited amount of time is that I think we're focusing pretty strongly on the automobile situation, the vehicle situation, and in this broader discussion, there's not very much standing for the bike and pedestrian traffic that passes through there. So as you were looking at the charts that Jaime presented, there really wasn't any mention of, well, how are the bikes going to be affected when they move through there? And I mentioned in perhaps my correspondence that if we can make a better accomplishment for the bike and the pedestrian movement through there, that in fact that would lift or help with the challenge with the automobiles, because there's a lot of us in Palo Alto that would actually make that trip, or more people would make that trip to Town and Country if they felt like they weren't going to get hit on the way there. I don't know if you had a chance to notice correspondence that I sent in. So I think one just piece of background was that I began this in 2008 with Gail, and perhaps it was Ashok, and spoke to placing railing along Embarcadero back in 2008, and actually thought it had been negotiated when they made mitigation agreements with the Trader Joe's installation. So it isn't a new issue. It's something that got vetted by, I went through all the committee processes, and what was sad was that it was agreed upon but not implemented. So I felt it was considered. And the reason I would rank it as one of the higher issues is just if you observe it, both the roadway slope or the pathway slope to Embarcadero, the cars go, when it's not trafficy, they move 45 miles an hour, and the kids exist in another zone. So another area that I've been working on, but I think knowing that I'm in the sum up mode, but I feel that staff's, I started out whining, but I actually feel like staff gets it now. They probably had got it, but it wasn't perhaps communicated as well. But I felt that the school district and staff weren't coordinating adequately on this mission, and I actually feel, based on some discussions I've had with staff and the school district, that that some of these concepts are going to be implemented. So I'll keep trying to be a resource to you, and I appreciate your taking a look at the information I did. And if you have any questions, it's not hard to find me. Take care.
And there's one more speaker, yet there's more. Robert Moss, you have 3 minutes. Or are you here for agenda item 2? Oh. Item 2, okay, never mind. Okay, that's our final speaker for the Embarcadero Road item.
Thanks to members of the public for your comments and for your letters and emails that you sent in, particularly for those people who weren't able to be here tonight. Let's come back to the commission and open up for comments or questions. And let me just be clear, there's no voter authorization or recommendation needed from us, but it's just any input that might be helpful to clarify the work that you're doing.
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm looking around. Commissioner Gardias?
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with some questions that will help us to understand the situation. So you said, I mean, thank you very much. I think it's a well-prepared presentation, and the overview was excellent. So thank you. There's a couple of issues you mentioned that you work with school. So I would like to know what's their perspective on this, what just one of the speakers asked about, just closing the traffic completely through Embarcadero Road and just moving the students along the bike road to the town and country. So that's question number one, right? Number two is that I know that we are that this is not related to this topic, right? But is there from the longer perspective, right? Has anybody done any studies about eliminating completely car entry from the north side, from Embarcadero side to the school? And I know that you already talked about this, right? But then you also mentioned that that giving this current studies, right, that doesn't seem feasible, but maybe there is some possibility. Maybe there was something done in the background on some other studies. So I would like to understand, because just looking at these two centers, right, school and Trader Joe, this looks pretty much the area between those two. For the future, it looks to me like it has a great, cultural potential, right? Commerce center and vibrant school, right? So if you add them two, it's a fantastic community. But they are separated with this road, right? So my first reaction would be, of course, just to combine them too. But it's of course not possible today. But I would like to understand this greater perspective, right? So that's just for this moment. And then one more question in regards to the school's perspective, right? If there would be some recommendation, let's say, for just closing of that pedestrian traffic or restricting this of the students between one side and the other, right? Would there be any impact on the commerce of the town and country, right? That, of course, benefits a lot from the students. So thank you very much.
Staff, you can answer if you have.
I'll do my best. Thank you, Commissioner Gardia. So on the 3 points, we have had a lot of discussions with Palo and the school district regarding, just in general, what's a good long-term solution out here. Again, they're very supportive of beginning to work with us to figure out if we need to widen into the school district, what's that limit of right-of-way. I'm not going to put words in their mouth. They haven't said we'll work with you and not charge you for land, but that's kind of the perception that I've felt from them, that they're willing to work with us to identify the right-of-way take that's necessary for the longer-term improvements and work with us to make sure that those get done. Those, again, are of course, policy discussions that may happen later. But at least for now, at a staff-to-staff level, we're in agreement that we're just trying to work together to identify the best alternative for the community. So again, I want to thank the school district staff and the Palo administrators for working with us to date. From the perspective of the pedestrian operations, it's gone back and forth. When they've done major construction on the campus, they've historically kind of blocked access from the campus to that ped crossing, and they've done that twice now. They did it during the construction improvements that happened for the gymnasium and other projects a little over a year ago, and then last school year they reopened it again and closed the trail access that goes to the Caltrain trail. Well, this year they have more construction now happening for the theater, and they kind of blocked access to that trail crossing, and they're encouraging kids to kind of get back to the Caltrain trail. So we haven't had the discussion about, does it make sense to kind of keep that as a permanent access point in the future? But my perspective is from a traffic administrator for the city, that would make a lot of sense, because people will have that choice. The less we can keep kids from trying to cross at that crossing during the day, give them a great separated option to avoid traffic, that's always better for traffic, it's better for safety. And so I think that if we continue to work with the district to have that discussion, I think that, it's a win-win for everybody. In regards to the driveway closure to Palo from Embarcadero, it is something that we have not studied. What we did introduce at one point as staff was we introduced the concept of trying to see if it made sense to introduce a left turn from El Camino directly into Palo. That was something that was in that One Bay Area grant proposal that we discussed before. The district was pretty receptive to say, hey, let's at least study it. We'll see if it makes sense. They weren't willing to build it, neither were we, but we agreed that it was something that was worth studying. But I do think that a closure would have some impacts because there are a lot of people that do drive there that have to drive to the school. And so if we divert them from Embarcadero Road, they still have to stay on Embarcadero Road and make a left at El Camino Real. So I don't know that there's much efficiency that would be gained by closure. From the standpoint of commerce, 1,500 kids, that's 50 kids having lunch at Town and Country. I don't know that would go over very well from the standpoint of the business community and economic development to close it, but we're more interested in wanting to make sure they have safe access, and safe access from our perspective is stay on the Caltrain trail versus try to cross at the traffic signal.
Just I wanted to clarify, right? My last question was pretty much, right, will going around along the Caltrain trail, right, will it impact the commerce, right? Because it's going to be additional couple of minutes, right? And so that was my question, right? So was any study done? Will there be any impact on revenue or number of lunches that they may serve to the students? Or
I don't know, Commissioner Curtis, but what I can tell you is now that we're in this condition where the trail is open again during lunch, we do plan on wanting to count that this year while that condition exists, because it lets us compare and contrast. The 1,500 number that you saw, that was from data last year. Now we'll have a comparison, for data this year. And so if they're equal volume, then it's not having any impact.
Commissioner Rosenblum.
Thank you for this. Actually, I thought everything in the report was very clear. In terms of where you're going to focus the study in the future, just a couple of things are of most interest to me. One of the things I always observe is that whenever you widen roads, people fill it as if it hadn't been widened. You just get more cars. And so I noticed that one of the major considerations is the widening of Embarcadero for a certain stretch. On the one hand, I'm excited because I'm an avid cyclist as well. I'd love to not be on the sidewalk after I come through the tunnel. If there's actually a way to link the Homer Tunnel effectively to Stanford, I think that'd be a great boon. I don't see how that doesn't get done without widening. But the thing I'd like to understand is, to what extent can you flush out traffic that are waiting for various turns? So one gentleman talked about flushing out the right turn. You've talked about the stacking around the bulb, trying to turn left into Palo. And that I would understand widening would allow you to just flush out some of the turners. Is the goal to be able to widen to the extent that you can accommodate all of those turners and put in additional bike lanes, or is it something else?
Thank you, Commissioner Rosenblum. So from the standpoint of widening, I'll let Atul kind of defend me here if I say anything wrong, but I think it's less about trying to be able to flush out, but more about trying to safely stack so that cars don't spill over into oncoming lanes of traffic behind them. So in the example of the existing Palo driveway, it's a relatively short left turn today. It's got that painted taper. Once people follow the taper, which like they should, all of a sudden their back end of their car is in the head-on scenario of a car behind them, or rear-end scenario of a car behind them. And so that additional stacking capacity just makes it safer to let people be in an area away from other movements on the roadway. And that of course provides efficiencies. There are ways to get stacking or flushing benefits, but that has to happen at El Camino Real. And unless the city were to take that over, I just don't see us getting that benefit. If we took it over, it's a very simple fix from a technology solution to let the signal flush out if it hits a certain point in a stacking lane, but we don't have that benefit today.
I see. Thanks. That's very helpful. The other, are you good with that? The other question, and this was also brought up by one of the previous public commenters, have you looked at an additional overpass? I know that sounds potentially crazy, but I was thinking about, we say, well, it's only another 100 yards for a student to walk around. I don't know exactly how far it is, but we're very concerned by people at peak hours having to wait 300 seconds at the car intersection. But yet we don't really mind asking a student to walk at least 300 more seconds around when they have a timed lunch break. And I know my kids at school, rush to get to lunch and rush back, and they're at Jordan, and they always feel like they're under time pressure, and they don't even have to go across the street. So I am a little bit concerned at saying, well, it shouldn't be that far. But how much does it cost to build a pedestrian-only overpass? Was that a consideration at all? I assume it's not on the table. It's not in the report.
Thank you, Commissioner Rosenblum. From the standpoint of, is it on the table? I would say at this point, anything's on the table. That's what we're asking for your feedback tonight. If there's a lot of strong interest and perspective on looking at overpassing structures, I think that, it's our job to make sure we at least consider it as part of the larger corridor study. For the near-term improvements that we're talking about tonight, obviously that's a much larger project than what we're looking to do through simple signal efficiencies. But to give it a perspective, the overcrossing that's being planned at Highway 101 at Adobe Creek, that's about a little over $10 million project. An overcrossing here might be in the neighborhood of around maybe $6 to $7 million. The bicycle pedestrian transportation plan didn't look at this as a potential overcrossing scenario, but we do in the bicycle pedestrian plan talk about the need for an additional undercrossing, to get you from the Alma to the El Camino Real side of the Caltrain tracks, somewhere in the area between Embarcadero Road and Oregon. So that would provide some connection benefit, but not directly to this area. I think the less there where there's more concern is that we do have, again, the really nice Embarcadero Trail connection, but it's just not a good way to get to it.
Yeah.
And you have to do that little U-turn that the school's now forcing in front of Trader Joe's, and that, again, is kind of going in and out of your way. Again, it's a safer way. I think if the school district can work with us to just keep that new connection open at the back of their gymnasium, I think that would go a long way.
Thanks. Thank you.
Commissioner Tanaka.
So two quick questions. First of all, I just want to make a comment. I thought the report was very well thought out, so thank you for your work on this. So first question is, I was thinking about your proposal to have essentially to eliminate the 2 lanes going into town and country. And I was just thinking about that. Why couldn't cars turn right and left into there at the same time?
I think wide because it's just an opportunity for somebody if they take a turn too wide for a broadside type crash. I think this scenario probably does happen in real life. I have seen it myself. It isn't something that would result in a lot of delay getting into town and country if it was a narrower lane and people just had to wait an extra second or two to execute their turn movement. I think what we're trying to do is provide efficiencies, and the efficiencies in this operation is for the delays getting out of town and country. The bigger delays on Embarcadero are trying to get kind of past El Camino Real that kind of spill over to the east to these other 2 locations. But the bigger concern that I've heard, number one location since I've gotten to Palo Alto a little 4 years ago, is people trying to get out of town and country, and it is rather difficult. It is striped as 1 lane formally and operates as 2, but it doesn't take a lot to really clog that intersection up. And so there's just better benefit into trying to get either formally 2 or a 3rd lane out of town and country than there is in trying to retain a wide enough space for 2 lanes entering town and country.
Huh. Okay. Well, I definitely agree with having striping it so that cars can leave easier. That makes a lot of sense. I was just thinking, because I've gone to town and country many times, and I think I've made it right when there were cars going left multiple times. So I was just trying to think of why eliminate that. And if you did, would it cause a backup on Embarcadero or?
Yeah, that's something that we can look at as part of the design. If it will cause any delays, my initial sense is that because you'll have kind of still dedicated movements trying to come into town and country, it probably won't be too much of a delay.
Okay. Second question is, what kind of outreach have you started to do with town and country and Poly?
So again, we actually met with them pretty regularly. We've had several discussions with the school district about this design. They know that we're looking at making the modifications across the street. They were the ones that kind of came to us and said, hey, that median you put in on the driveway a few years ago, it's causing more problem than benefit, and so that's why we're now looking at its removal. I think that we still won't see the long-term benefits with its removal until we widen the other side of the Pali driveway, but that requires widening of some form, towards El Camino Real, which I think that it's something we need to weigh. But we want your thoughts. If we can definitely wait and try and widen it out and improve both driveways at the same time, but that could take another year. And we know for sure we can just implement the corner where you exit out of Palo, and we can get that done before spring.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Alcheck.
Before I share my initial comment, could you clarify something? Is the primary concern with respect to requiring students to use the existing overpass an issue of the length of their lunch period?
Thank you, Commissioner Alcheck. No, my understanding is that it was more about trying to avoid conflicts with the pedestrians through the construction staging of the driveways to the construction zone for the theater. So it was a proactive choice by the school to reopen the connection to the Caltrain trail so they can walk around the construction zone.
So is it safe to assume that at some point we could require students to use that overpass exclusively?
I think it's something that we would want to continue to encourage the school district. You know, we don't operate and maintain the facility of Palo itself. That is a school district facility.
No, but I mean,
Yeah,
if we eliminated the crosswalk where it is now at the future date when access would resume from the overpass, is there another concern there?
I think that part of the concern about an ultimate closure is that if you remove the one crossing, then there is no type of controlled crossing across Embarcadero Road, really from Bryant Street until you get to El Camino Real. So, you know, there's the issue of students trying to get to, Pali from, say, the Crescent Park area along the north side of the street, kind of doing the big loop to get to the back of the campus. But then if you're trying to get to the campus for another activity, say a theater event in the future, then all of a sudden you do put those future pedestrians in an area kind of way out of the way rather just trying to get directly to the campus. So maintaining a connection does have some benefits, but eliminating pedestrian use from the school, I think that you just encourage that more than restrict it by giving them another alternative. Today they don't have another alternative. They either got to go over the overcrossing or they have the pedestrian crossing, which today is really inefficient to get you from the school because of the fencing for the construction zone.
Okay, so the goal here is, for us to provide input. My input would be that we encourage the staff to consider the closure of that crosswalk. And the reason why I say that is because I don't believe the crosswalk at El Camino is insufficient, or the crosswalk, the overpass. And one of the locations where there's sort of a similar setup is at De Anza College near the Flint Center, where people try to access, I'm not sure what the name of that mall is, the Oaks. Across the street from the Flint Center, there's a little mall right where 85 is. So you have 85, De Anza Boulevard, the Flint Center entrance, which is packed when they're doing certain events, and the individuals who try not to park in that Flint Center parking garage so that they don't spend $5, and they try to cross that street to get to the mall parking lot. And so I was reminded as I drove down Embarcadero the last week to sort of experience this at different hours of that intersection. And I think that once this construction, restricted access scenario ends, that would be a wise consideration, principally because of the amount of time it takes to cross that section. And I, not to suggest that their time at lunch isn't, valuable, but I think that they'll go the fastest route. And so if the fastest route is the most inconvenient for that intersection, then we shouldn't even allow it. And I would hope that if it became an issue of stressful management of their lunch hour, the school would accommodate them by increasing their lunch hour by 10 minutes or whatever it took to make it a safe lunch hour. That seems like a smaller sacrifice than getting an F rating on this intersection at peak hours. But that's comment one. And so the second thing I want to say is that I'm generally keen to support any informed attempt to improve our intersections. But I want to suggest that we approach this and essentially all future proposals as a trial. To be clear, I appreciate that uninstalling costly improvements would be considered wasteful.
but such changes I think are better if they're subject to review a year after their initial implementation, so that we can determine if those conditions are improved by the implementation, and if the community is satisfied. I'm not surprised that we don't have a lot of people here today to talk about it, but and I'll end here really quickly. But I think all of us have experienced some blowback with the Arrastadero road changes, and we've all sort of received comments about that. And the majority of us weren't even on the commission when those decisions were made. And so at least for this commission or future commissions, if this were to be implemented, I would certainly prefer if there was a 12-month trial and we came back, reviewed it. I imagine after 12 months, the community, if there was some concerns, would definitely show up, and they could say, oh, we like this change, we don't like this change, and that would be my comment.
Commissioner King?
Thank you for the thorough report. Let's see. So you mentioned it as far as, and I had remembered discussion in the past about combining, that we were going to get rid of one of the lights and just have one light with crosswalks. And you mentioned that I think, paraphrased, we don't want to mix traffic in with pedestrians. And so in that one intersection, the current Town and Country intersection, and my question is that, obviously, this is an art and science. The science and art that developed what's currently there did not work, it appears. And so it's not an infallible endeavor. And so my question is, how confident are we of that? And it seems to me, as a layperson, that if the lights are synchronized, I can't even think it through, but aren't you going to be mixing them somewhat because the lights are synchronized anyhow, or is that not the case? For instance, when cars are making a left turn out of Town and Country, aren't there going to be people in the crosswalks? I can't even conceptualize how that might work, but it seems like there's going to be some more element of risk possibly anyhow by desynchronizing them, or synchronizing them from where they are now.
Thank you, Commissioner King. I think a lot of it comes back to some of the comments that Commissioner Alchuk was making. A lot of it depends on just what the volume of pedestrian activity is. If we were not to change kind of access, permanently to the Caltrain Trail, 1,500 students trying to cross to Embarcadero to Town and Country every day at lunchtime would really hurt the Town and Country long-term economic development, I think, because it's just nobody would want to go there because you can't get in and you can't get out. And so that wouldn't be good for the center. But at the same time, if we could find a way to partner with the school district to better manage access to an intersection at Town and Country and the Palo driveways that restricted or really limited pedestrian connectivity during key periods of the day like lunchtime, well, then maybe it's a little bit more manageable. And that's something that I think that the more I'm hearing you talk is something that I think we will need to put into the second phase of the study of the RFP to try and include a bigger discussion with the district about trying to restrict access. Today, we do have 2 points of access. I want to be very clear about that. The pedestrian crossing is not shut down. It is open to the public. The school district just, forces kids to kind of go up towards the Caltrain connector in the morning, and then in the lunch hour, they force them back out the same way. But all of the other times before that, it was either the Caltrain trail was open and you only had that option, or you just couldn't get to the town, to the ped crossing signal itself. So it's just a matter of like how we control the pedestrian movements, but that's something I think is just out of staff's control for the city of Palo Alto. It's working with the district to figure out how they manage their campus. And I don't know the answers to the question, but if we could find a way to do that, maybe there is a way to bring those pedestrian facilities away from a dedicated crossing back towards the intersections, but it will have inefficiencies. The biggest impact to traffic signal coordination is pedestrian crossings, because the length of time it takes to cross the street is long. People walk faster or slower, but you have to accommodate the worst case scenario. So there's definitely going to be some inefficiencies, but you can manage that inefficiency is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, thank you. So I hope that I guess my feedback would be, I hope we're not making assumptions that that wouldn't work. Then the other part of the equation is, I think it's interesting that and I haven't measured it, but if the speaker's 100 yards is accurate, I just did some quick calculations that at 20 minutes per mile, that's about 1 minute. 100 yards takes about 1 minute. And so I'd be curious as to how long the cycle time is for the pedestrian light. Like typically if the average pedestrian walks up, hits this button, or with the group, however it works, how long they're waiting at that to cross through the light relative to an unimpeded progress of 1 minute around. Any idea? Do we do we have the delay times for intersections for cars. Do we have that for pedestrians?
I don't have that data, but let's see what Chil could estimate something out.
So the cycle length at the ped crossing is 105 seconds. So they're waiting that long till they get the
105 seconds. Okay, so if true, it would be faster to walk around than it would to go through, and that would be data that would, if true, that would support, hey, we shouldn't even have that crosswalk. People should be routed around. Now, the other part of the equation is, and I don't know what you're doing in the short term, is as far as safety. Now you get 1,500 kids in an hour, whatever that is, lots per minute, and bikes going through there, and before and after school. How do you keep separation to make it safe? For instance, under the Embarcadero Tunnel, it says pedestrians on the right, bikes on the left, or vice versa. So how do you ensure, just as Stanford had troubles where they had bike pedestrian collisions, how do you make dense bike and pedestrian pathways safe for everybody? So I guess that would be my concern there. I hope we're looking at that here in the short term, and also in the long term. Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So firstly, I note that it appears that there are relatively few bicycles crossing the crosswalk signal, according to the data that we have here. And therefore, at lunchtime, I would presume that most people are walking and just leaving their bike. Of people who bike to Palo are leaving their bike there, walking to eat at Town and Country and walking back, so that the conflict for bikes and pedestrians probably is not happening during lunchtime. The second thing is that I note that there are very few cars going between Town and Country and Palo at any time of day. And one thing interesting is that if you only allow left turns and right turns, the traffic is synchronized much better than if you allow through traffic across those two driveways, because then you might have to have a dedicated turn lane, straight through lane for that. And if you avoid straight through traffic, then you can just have a left turn or right turn lane, or maybe two left turn lanes, but you don't need to have a shared straight lane and a turn lane. So I think that should be considered to avoid traffic problems. And in terms of signalizing on El Camino, and I know people don't want to increase the signalization on that either, but one thing is, to the extent that there was signalization at the other Town and Country drive on El Camino, then traffic can go out there, and that would reduce people trying to turn out of the Town and Country driveway and turn left from Embarcadero Road onto El Camino southbound. And I can't tell you how many people I see squeezing out there, blocking the through traffic on Embarcadero Road, so that traffic can't even get through there to get to Stanford, and that's a problem. In addition, I see people on the Town and Country area at that intersection who are trying to get through to make the left or a right turn onto Embarcadero Road, who are blocking the access road in that little intersection there internal to Town and Country, and thereby blocking people from entering Town and Country from Embarcadero Road, because there's limited places to stack up. So Town and Country needs to provide additional markings there, perhaps keep clear, perhaps additional stop signs there indicating what's going on. I think the stacking, two left turn lanes stacking on the exit will help. but I do see that as a problem that needs to be addressed. In terms of the synchronization of the crosswalk with the traffic light, I think that if the crosswalk remains, and currently I understand no plans to remove it, but if the crosswalk remains, so long as the crosswalk remains, that synchronization is a good thing for having traffic flow through, and I presume that it would be synchronized in such a way that the green lights would be the same on the through movements, and on the turning movements is when pedestrians would cross, and then you have stacking issues, and there's limited stacking anyway, people coming out of town and country, so there'd be, they would be, instead of stacking before, they'd again stack in the place where Embarcadero merges down from 2 lanes to 1 lane going eastbound. That may delay the pedestrian crossing phase across Embarcadero. And if that does that, then people may, as was suggested by others, vote with their feet and take the overpass instead. And if based on the counts that happen from that, it may be worth doing analyses of those to see whether people will tend to use the overpass instead. So that's something worthwhile considering. Finally, the issue is that it might be there might be signage placed, and I'm not sure if this is planned for this, but there might be signage placed at the exit the underpass under Embarcadero, under Alma Street and the train tracks, directing people that that's a path to go without a signal across and out, because I'm not sure, I mean it's helpful for Pali staff to be there, I'm not sure how long they'll continue doing that, but to the extent that there's signage directing people to think about going that route rather than crossing, that may be helpful. In fact, they may do that instead of getting to the crosswalk, so that's something to consider. And I'll continue my comments another round.
Just go.
Okay, just go. Okay, great. So a couple things else. So first of all, think about having a flashing red arrow or light at Trader Joe's instead of completely removing the traffic light, because this way people will know to stop. People tend to drive out of there crazy, so if the flashing red light may help in addition to a stop sign. On the westbound Embarcadero Road to left turn into Pali, the problem you have is a widening of the road. And particularly in the spring when you have additional drivers that are students driving the Pali, they may get confused. So to the extent that you can continue the line that separates the left turn lane into Pali from the through traffic through dotted lines or a white line, continuing that there so that they know where to go, and people who are going through know to go to the right of that and not sort of have to dart out of that lane at the last minute. Some people hug the left, hug the double yellow line because they don't. That's what they do. So that might be a good way to mark that. Eventually, if Caltrain is ever undergrounded, which is, I think, a thing that I am certainly desirous of, it may be the case that Embarcadero Road is brought to a grade intersection at grade intersection with Alma, in which case the turning movements will be in there, and then further study can be done about putting further undercrossings for bikes, and also the idea of simplifying it so that roads connections can go better in that direction, and that would reduce the traffic on Churchill, by the way. Let's see, anything else? I'm not sure whether Stanford has underlying ownership of Palo Alto High School. I believe it may. And if it does, then this may be in concert with discussions with Stanford. I don't know the case with whether it is or not, but that needs to be, whether they need to be in the mix in that discussion for dedication of land. In terms of if you put a traffic light on Pali entering from El Camino, would that mean that you would then keep or potentially remove the left turn from Embarcadero onto Pali and direct people to go the longer way around and thereby have longer stacking into that left turn lane? So that may be another thing to consider. And I think that's it. Thank you.
If I could just respond very quickly, I know that we want to go to the comments, but I spent half an hour drawing something just for Arthur, so I don't want to let the opportunity slip me to present it. So this is how the signal would operate. I think it's very just important for the community to kind of understand this, and for you at the commission as well. So this is what's called a phase diagram for a combined traffic signal at Town and Country, Pali, and then the Pali Pet Crossing. So these two movements here are the left turns turning from Embarcadero into either Pali or Town and Country. And what's not shown, because I moved it on accident, is this right turn arrow is coming out of Town and Country. That's what Arthur was asking about, trying to make it efficient. That right turn arrow would also be here so that if whenever people are turning left in Town and Country, people could be turning right out of Town and Country to make it a little bit more efficient. The same time that those left turns are going, that's when the signal would have a gate to allow the pedestrian crossing to move in the near term. So each box is either Town and Country or Pali, but it can only operate this way. This is how we guarantee coordination of the two signals. If demand were continuous, then when the through movements on Embarcadero, the drivers was going, we'd be maintaining the green at the pedestrian crossing. So we maintain that strong progression to move cars out towards El Camino Real, which again is a different story, but we can at least get them there, and then we have to work on the next phase of moving them past El Camino Real. Then the Town and Country drive would go, and this would be the 3 lanes that were discussed in the staff report. It could be a left turn only, like Arthur discussed, but there aren't a lot of cars going through. So there's no really strong reason to not let them go through for the few that want to. So it's just an efficiency. But again, when the left turns would go, we could force the signal at the pedestrian crossing to remain green longer, and that's what causes a lot of delays today. One of the changes that we already made was we lengthened the amount of time that we give cars to exit Town and Country. So a lot of people fall asleep. People are waiting at 3 different points, coming from the bakery or coming from any of the locations. If anyone doesn't move into that intersection, just clog it up right away. If they fall asleep, the signal will go to yellow and red and result in longer delays. We kind of fixed that problem earlier last week. But then when the Town and Country driveway goes, that's when the next pedestrian cycle is. So from the standpoint of a pedestrian perspective, they probably won't wait any longer than the 105 seconds that they're already waiting today. But they wouldn't be able to stop the traffic along the rest of the corridor. That's how we guarantee the progression.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So for my comments, also thanks to the staff for an excellent report. It appears there's good cooperation among the city, representatives of Pali and the school board and Town and Country, although I think our discussion this evening might have been improved or enhanced if representatives from Pali and Town and Country were here to express their concurrence or a different point of view. Hopefully they will rectify that absence when this goes to council. I'm not going to attempt micromanaging the traffic engineering, so I'll leave that to Vice Chair Keller. One question on the suggestion from the public and colleagues with which I tend to concur is the curiosity about the feasibility or cost of a pedestrian overpass. And with regard to that, it might be something that would merit investigating a public-private partnership, particularly if the city looks at the annual sales tax collected from Town and Country, as well as revenue derived by Town and Country from student purchasing activity, that if there were a pedestrian overpass as part of the infrastructure, this might actually be of economic benefit to the participants and result in cost sharing. So I have personally experienced many of the challenges and frustrations of this location. I attended Pali beginning in 1965, rode my bike to school every day, and more recently I've been a parent of a Pali student and experienced the frustrations of doing the drop-off, and I patronize the stores at Town and Country, and I know what the wait times are all about, and I think that your initiatives to fix this in any way should be as urgent as possible, notwithstanding coming back 12 months later and seeing if it's working. There's something about the path of least resistance relative to the PED crossing, and I think that it's a mistake to allow that to be the shortcut or the quickest time. And I think that I hadn't thought of just eliminating that crossing. Thanks to colleagues for suggesting, and I tend to agree with that. You've got the corner, and you've got the walk around at the bike trail, and that probably should be enough. Also, you could have, similar to what they do at busy intersections in, say, San Francisco, stop the car traffic altogether for some amount of time and then have the pedestrians just scramble like crazy right at the car signal if you need that additional path for pedestrians. But I would have that less attractive in terms of the time constraint than the corner and the bike path. So make it so that is a greatest resistance rather than an attractive nuisance, if you can do that with the traffic engineering. I wonder, in terms of collaborating with the school, you talk about the volume of students coming in the lunch hour. I know that the school, as a recent, Palo parent, is pretty innovative with respect to their scheduling. And why not have sort of a staggered lunch hour? So it's the 1,500 students don't happen in 60 minutes, they happen in 120 minutes or 90 minutes. So that probably could mitigate that quite a bit and not really be out of character with the Palo culture and what students are already sort of doing. Also, some academic campuses are oriented towards having activities at lunchtime, and I wonder if the city might actually sort of encourage Palo to enrich the on-campus activities at lunchtime so that people aren't just hot to trot and go over and spend money at El Camino when they got club meetings and sports activities or other things on campus rather than going shopping. We had some input from cyclists, member of Payback and others. An example is I think your long-term consideration of improvements to the safe routes to school, particularly from Crescent Park. That was where I rode my bike when I was 14 years old, and where I still ride my bike when I go on my bike rides, which is frequently. And I actually go through the intersection, a lot, and it's actually pretty dangerous. So it's, this is something you're well aware of. But I think that one of the things that is a safety workaround coming from that part of town towards that intersection or towards Palo is to maybe have signs to encourage people to cross at Bryant or Waverly and get on the south side of Embarcadero. So if they're going into Palo, they don't have to cross at the pedexing or even go all the way to Churchill. So they enter the Palo campus with the people who are cycling up in that direction. So that's actually pretty easy and pretty safe for cyclists, and if you encourage that with signage and green striping on the road and whatnot, I think that's all I have for the moment. So we were hoping to finish this topic by 7:30. Some of us gave ourselves more time than others of us, but so if there's any other members of the commission who have one comment or question that is important, I'd like to give you the opportunity to make that one comment or question. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll take a 10-minute intermission and come back and talk about PC zoning. Hey, Mark. Our next topic, which is Planned Community PC zoning reform, a study session on possible revisions to the Planned Community PC district regulations. And before we go to Consuelo for a staff report, let me try to frame what I hope will be the outcome of the discussion, and then you can comment on that as well from the staff perspective. So I believe that the work put in by staff in the staff report is excellent. It frames most of the issues, and it was particularly helpful because it captured very faithfully the full range of comments from the Commission and Commissioners at our last meeting. It was very clear that these were all individual ideas and insights, and it wasn't taking a vote or consensus of the Commission. And you did an excellent job of capturing all of them, so thank you for that. So you did an excellent job of identifying what I believe are the major issues. One is the process for establishing a PC zone. Next would be whether or not there's a definition or a clear understanding of what constitutes public benefit. Another is the possibility of establishing a menu of potential public benefit contributions. Another would be understanding how to use economic analysis in relationship to the potential increase in valuation from upzoning. Another is the lack historically of an effective enforcement mechanism regarding public benefit in PC districts, which, for example, might be some sort of a performance bond or contractual liquidated damages or indemnity or something of that nature. Another challenge is the requirement under the ordinance that the PC zone be found consistent with the comprehensive plan when the comprehensive plan update process is so prolonged, and the comprehensive plan may be arguably long in the tooth, if not out of date, as well as the the potential update of the zoning map that typically follows the update of the comprehensive plan. So when you have both the comp plan and zoning ordinance on such long cycles, it tends to exacerbate the need for flexibility and interim action. Another is the potential reliance on development agreements in addition to or instead of planned community zoning, where it might be a viable alternative or something that allows for the payment by the applicant of a fee for as part of the agreement. And so I think those are structurally some of the items that are important for this discussion to touch on. Now, we heard last time that there's a long history to the use of PC zoning in Palo Alto, and a lot of it has been very beneficial. Some of it is controversial and arguably has been a problem which we'd like to fix. So it might be useful for our discussion tonight to focus on what's not working. What are the problems? And after reading the staff report, I think you've hit on most of the issues. I put them in a slightly different order just as I was taking notes. The first is whether or not the ordinance should be revised. And I think clearly this is a good discussion. It might be revised to add a definition of public benefit. It might be revised to add a menu of public benefits. And it might be revised with respect to the process by which PC zoning is initiated. Is it initiated first at the council level, or does the PTC initiate? Then you hit on the issues relating to whether or not there's an effective enforcement mechanism, and we should talk about that. You also hit upon how in the process we might utilize an economic analysis, either an independent economic analysis or disclosure by the applicant of the pro forma of their financials, and use that to achieve some commensurate public benefit. And what exactly is commensurate would be an interesting discussion, mitigated by risk, time value of money, in perpetuity. There's all sorts of subtleties to that. To me, another issue which you didn't really flesh out is that to the extent that there is a process and a system by which applicants submit their proposals for a PC zoning, oftentimes they will seek out discussions with members of council, members of this commission privately to have what's called an ex parte discussion of the proposal. And I think both the council, if I can be so bold as to suggest anything to the council, and the commission should consider it relevant to relook at the policy of each body on ex parte communications regarding quasi-judicial matters. That this may be perfectly constructive and above board, but the manner in which it's done is probably something which bears on public trust in the outcome. So those are, I think, are the big issues as I see them. And once again, I think we have an excellent staff report, but maybe we'll turn it to staff and you can update us on any thinking you've had since we had our last meeting.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Michael. Consuelo Hernandez, Senior Planner. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. We don't have a formal presentation for you tonight since it is a continued study session. And really what we did is took some of the feedback that we heard from you last time to collect additional data, specifically concentrating on the period between 2000 and 2014, and added additional columns to the original data set that we provided, which included what was the trigger for PC zoning, and what were the public benefits associated with those particular projects. And we also cleaned up a lot of the addresses and added, the common name for the development to make it easier for you to look at that. And in the staff report as attachment B, we also started to prepare a preliminary analysis of what the typical public benefits have been since PC zoning has been in place. And we started to build on how those public benefits have changed over the last 14 years. And the last component that we added is on the second page of attachment B, is an initial tally of the number of units that have resulted from PC zoning. And I just wanted to add one clarifying point that I did not include in the staff report or in that attachment, is that it only includes the BMR or low-income units that were explicitly identified as a public benefit. So there are some instances where BMRs were generated out of a PC zone, but they weren't specifically identified as a public benefit. Specifically, if you look at the JCC, the public benefit identified is a variety of housing types, but it doesn't explicitly state that 24 BMR units actually resulted from that project. And in order to frame the discussion today, we were hoping that the PTC could concentrate or focus the discussion around, as the chair mentioned, making sure that staff did capture all of the comments that you made last time about your issues or concerns with PC zoning, and what recommendations you have for the council, either to reform the existing ordinance, change the name perhaps of the approach for this type of flexible tool that we have in our code currently, and any input that you have on how we can outreach to the community on making sure that we capture everybody's input on their issues for PC. And staff is here to answer any questions, and that concludes our staff report.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the public speakers, we have 2 speaker cards, and if there's anybody else here who would like to speak, please submit a card and then you'll be recognized. I know that on occasion the the commission will take straw votes just to get a consensus of where we are. And I'm typically not in favor of that because it's in situations where I don't think that the nature of the vote is well articulated, and therefore it's not clear to me what our voting really signifies. But I'm wondering if tonight we might consider using straw votes on some of the key issues, if that would help us give you the kind of feedback that would lend weight or credence to our interest.
Thank you, Chair Michael. I don't think we would be adverse to that. It may be easier than a full straw vote on some of these points. It seems that there was a lot of agreement and commonality between the Commission's comments last time, and if we used the bullets in the staff report, it might be possible to say, does anyone disagree with the next bullet? Because I think there are many of these that wouldn't take a lengthy discussion to demonstrate some level of consensus. But we're open to discuss that procedure further if you want to take the public testimony, and then we can decide if that would work for you or not.
Great, thanks. So let's go to public testimony, and then maybe we'll just have a complete round of comments from commissioners, and then we'll consider if it would be useful for us to try to achieve consensus by straw voting.
How many minutes?
Let's go to the public speakers and give them 3 minutes.
The first speaker is Robert Moss, to be followed by Patricia Saphir.
Thank you, Chair Michael and Commissioners. I think you did a very good job of summarizing what the staff report says and some of the major issues. And I want to touch on just a few of the points they made, which I think are very useful. Under public benefits, I certainly agree we have to clarify what a public benefit is. And we have to have a public benefit that not only means something, but as I said later on, is ongoing. If we have a public benefit that vanishes in a relatively short period of time, but the change in the zoning and land use goes on forever, that's not a real benefit. Also, the benefit should be related to the nearby area. It shouldn't be a citywide benefit. For example, one that's on hold right now, the PC proposal at El Camino and Page Mill, where one of the proposed public benefits was improving the streetlights on California Avenue, which is 4 to 8 blocks away, depending on what part of California Avenue you're talking about. That's not specific to the site, not appropriate. The benefit has to be structured so, as it says, it's maintained constantly. That means if the public benefit is a payment of money, the money is going to get spent. And it's not necessarily going to get spent on something related to the project. So just accepting cash as a public benefit is a really bad idea. Under enforcement, as you know, the PC requirements have never been enforced. There's been no penalty. So there should be a requirement first on ongoing PCs, and then you might consider going back to the existing PCs and say, if the public benefit no longer exists, you must restore that benefit or you will be fined, and give them a period of time before the benefit can be put back in place, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And then after that, there's a fine every day, every month, whatever. But otherwise, there's no enforcement. It'll never be done. Under 4, parameters defining what a PC is and how it's different from the normal one. I think it's very important because many times the PC is not that much different from standard zoning, and sometimes someone comes in and says, well, I'm going to put more housing in. Well, maybe we should change the zoning from RM20 to RM30, and you get more housing in, but we all know what the parameters are of the zoning. So it's got to be very clearly identified what you're getting and why. The comprehensive plan really is our overall guiding principles. And all too often the PC violates comprehensive plan policies and principles. When that happens, the PC should be rejected, either rejected or significantly modified so that it does comply. And finally, the economic analysis of the cost and benefits both to the developer and the city is extremely important so you know what the real benefits are on each side.
The next speaker is Patricia Safier, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
It's Saffir, but I don't really care much. I couldn't pronounce it when I married my husband either. So, Chairman Michael and members of the commission, I just have some general comments.
Yeah, if you could speak into the microphone, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just have some general comments and opinions as a longtime resident of Palo Alto. I'm here tonight to ask you not to recommend getting rid of the PC zoning in the current process and not to severely restrict it. I believe the process has generally served us very well for many years. Now, because the voters who chose to vote rejected a project approved by the council, we seem to be sort of panicking, and I don't think we need to do that. I agree that the process should provide clear information to the public at an early stage and opportunities for us to voice our opinions. I also agree that there should be mechanisms to make sure that the promised benefits continue to exist. It may also be a good idea to restrict the maximum size of the PC projects and use a more inclusive planning device such as a PD district for very large areas. But I do not think that other specifications and restrictions are a good idea. Zoning is by nature an arbitrary and restrictive process. We cannot possibly foresee when beneficial opportunities may arise which cannot be realized under the exact zoning. We need a flexible process so that we will not miss out on these opportunities. Regarding public benefit, to me, the project itself should have value to the community, and this should be the major public benefit. I particularly do not like the suggestion made at your last meeting that economic quid pro quo should be the major or the only public benefit factor. For example, if a developer proposes a well-designed BMR project, I don't care if calculation shows that the privileges granted under the PC have increased the value of his property significantly. We need that kind of housing, and that's what matters. And there are other examples where the same logic might apply. So to conclude, please don't cripple a useful process which has gotten us some fine projects. I want you and the City Council to have to work and think and exercise your judgment. Thank you.
So I would like to thank the public for turning out in such quality statements this evening, and to suggest that we have 2 vacancies coming up on the PTC, and applications can be submitted to the city clerk if you're interested in serving up here on the dais. You would probably do a great job. So with that, let me turn to the commission, and we're going to basically take as much time as we need to on this topic, but we'll do it in rounds. So if 5 minutes is enough to get started, would somebody like to? Commissioner Rosenblum.
First, huge thanks. I had a ton of requests at the last meeting, and I think you fulfilled most of them, so I really, really appreciate that. So the table that you produced in particular I found really useful, and it wasn't actually what I thought the results would be. I had thought that if you did the survey of all PC zone projects since 2000, the preponderance of them would have been triggered by height or density or setback variance, etc. And that doesn't appear to be the case. And it encourages me that good zoning changes would actually make the PC zoning process something that is more rare and does allow us to capture the exceptional opportunities that the last speaker was referring to, while allowing what seems to be the most common triggers to move forward without an undue or special process. So in particular, if I might be reading it wrong, but there were 20 projects since 2000. It seems like only 6 were triggered because of density, height, or footprint. Specifically, and there's an overlap between the two. In density, there were 6, of which 4 had a major BMR component, and that seemed to be the prevailing reason for their density. Height, specifically, were 3, of which there's an overlap. But there were a variety of others. There were some that were auto-related, and I have a question for the staff, which is, I thought that we had an automotive dealership overlay. I didn't realize that that this would trigger the PC zoning process. And so I'll just ask a couple of these, and then I'd love to respond in bulk. There was one for childcare on site, and I guess I understand that you can't just. There must be a special process for going through to affirm that you want a childcare center on site. But the other one I found interesting is mixed use was the #1 trigger. And so that's one that I want to go down a bit of a longer road on, because there's a lot of theory around the benefits of mixed-use developments. And if by nature any mixed-use development triggers a PC process, that strikes me as an opportunity to define what is a standard for mixed use that we like that should not have to trigger this special process. And then finally, I identified some projects that just seem, because of their nature, they're so unusual that there can't be any zoning that you could really contemplate that should accommodate them, and then the PC process probably is appropriate for the benefit that those projects bring. But just to loop back around to the couple of questions I had, what is the reason, first, for the number of mixed use? Is it the case that there is not a zoning that contemplates mixed use adequately, and therefore so many projects get caught up for that trigger?
First, I just want to clarify that the automobile and the childcare, they were actually amendments to original PCs.
Okay.
So at the time, the automobile overlay wasn't in our zoning ordinance, and childcare in that instance wasn't identified as a permitted use in that particular PC. So that's the reason for those 2 changes. And in terms of the mixed use, if you look at when they were approved, our zoning ordinance was updated in 2007 to include a lot of more language for mixed use. So that can explain some of the reasons why you see some of the PCs having that mixed use component.
Okay, because if this is the case, then we really are talking about extraordinarily small number of projects that get triggered. So this table to me, again, is fairly revealing. If we feel like we have solved the majority of issues that lead to mixed use, that the automotive overlay was a relic of it being originally a PC zone, and therefore each amendment gets put in as another PC zone. Childcare also falls in that same category. I'll have to go back through this, but I think of the 20 projects since 2000, we're probably talking about a very small handful that are the problem children. So what do we do about them? But anyway, I'm quite encouraged by the table that if we went and saw, well, given the state of zoning today, if it does accommodate for many types of mixed use, what are the number of projects that would have to have gone through a PC zoning process? My guess is it's probably fewer than 8. But at any rate, we have to go back to the data, but I'm encouraged by that at the very least. So thank you for preparing that data. That's very helpful for me.
Commissioner Alchek?
I'm hoping we can do a few rounds tonight, so I'll try to keep my initial comments short. It occurred that I found the table extremely informative. I'll be less subtle than Commissioner Rosenblum. You know, I think if our local news weekly was especially motivated to provide much needed information on this issue, they would just reprint this table in its entirety in our upcoming edition. I think the community should be aware of these specific PC projects. And I would almost encourage, I'd encourage us to go a little farther into the past so that we could resist the anticipated suggestion that it's not comprehensive. After reviewing it, I was almost shocked that we ever proceeded to have this discussion without such a table. And it's overwhelming to me that the City Council even put the PC process on hiatus without such a table to sort of defend the program. I appreciate your comments today about our one of two community members who spoke about the process. When we went through the process of writing the colleagues memo a year and a half ago, we spent a long time kind of talking about what should a public benefit be. Should it be should the use itself that is accomplished by the project be a public benefit, or should it be extrinsic? Should it be unrelated to the actual development of the site? I may be using that word wrong. And it occurred to me after looking at this that there are some very defensible land use designation changes that support a PC. And if we eliminated the PC, and bear in mind I made a lot of comments at our last meeting about this quid pro quo kind of pay-as-you-go zoning that conflict with the comments I'm making tonight, but my point is if we eliminated this PC, what process would an owner of property in Palo Alto have to get creative on their site? It seems like a really adequate avenue for someone to suggest senior housing project or a grocery store, something that is not in line with what is the current site is provided for. And after reviewing some of the the bullet points that we talked about last time, particularly the idea that we shouldn't have benefits confused with mitigations. It occurred to me that if, for example, a project was seeking to exceed a certain limitation, and we were attempting to achieve some very creative goal or some very appealing project, below market housing, senior facilities, etc. If the project itself provided mitigation that essentially removed the concerns that we had with exceeding that limitation, I'm being very vague here, but then, to what extent do we want to be a community that accommodates the development of projects that make sense for our community, that may exceed certain limitations, but take actions to mitigate them? What would be the process by which someone could develop a senior center that might exceed a height limit, but mitigated concerns related to traffic or parking or other issues that the height limitation was there to protect? I may not be making myself really clear here, but after reviewing the table and thinking to myself, wow, we're a lot more cynical about this process than this table suggests we should be. And these limitations that we have are designed to protect us from certain results that we don't want. If they're mitigating for those results, maybe the public benefit can be the use. And maybe that evolves.
Commissioner Tanaka.
So I only have 3 brief comments. So first one is I certainly think this table is really good. It kind of shows all the projects that were approved. No, I think the issue, though, is that the issue is that this table is really of the approved projects. We actually had a lot more projects that were not approved, that are not on here. So if we actually were to do that, I think the results might be quite different than what's on this table. But anyway, so I just want to make that comment. I do think it's useful, though, but I think it's a little bit misleading in terms of what really happened. And then I think my second comment is I think the fundamental reason why the PC is needed is because we have this comp plan process where we're updating it, or at least we're trying to update it as fast as we can, and it's a very arduous process, long and arduous process. And so I think why a lot of these land use issues pop up is because the comp plan takes time to update, and it takes a while to update all the zoning codes. And so I think this is kind of why PC actually worked, is because it allowed you to tweak it slightly to make it a better overall for the city. But with those two common things said, I just want to support what the chair was proposing, which is to do some straw votes. I think we've all spent last session kind of giving our 2 cents as to what we thought was good, what was bad. But I think to be truly useful here, I think the chair's proposal of having some straw votes and having an organized way of kind of going through this so that staff could take some of this input and synthesize into something actionable, I think would be good. So I'll just suggest to the chair, maybe there's a way for us to do that in an expedient fashion without staying here too late tonight.
So I'm prepared, after everybody's had their first round of comments, to take Commissioner Tanaka up on a suggestion if staff concurs. Commissioner Gardias?
Thank you, Chair. So before I get to the PC zone, I'd like to just make a comment on this mixed land use, as it just came up, right? I think it's a historical ballast and pretty much, different perspective of the planning that is historical and I think that we're shifting slowly away from this, and then mixed use is becoming reality throughout all the zones. So for this discussion, I think it's not very much relevant, as already you argued, right? But I share your perspective, right? So going back to the PC zone, I'd like to just go quickly through the variety of points. So bear with me for a couple of minutes, Chair, if you don't mind. Just take more time a bit. So there is a relationship, I think, that's not defined very well between PC zone and the comprehensive plan. So comprehensive plan, and Robert Moss already talked about this for a moment. Thank you very much for your comments. Right, it's a higher level document, and then PC zone is a lower level document. Right. So from this perspective, there should be designation in the comprehensive plan of this where we as a city have an interest in growth or development. And then all the PC zones, there should be only within those areas. And I'm talking about the geographical area of interest. And then the interest could be about, along the traffic corridors, could be along some commercial corridors, university, California, El Camino, so forth, right? But then if you have this clarity between these two documents, then the public would know immediately, okay, well, this PC is not relevant to me because I'm beyond this area, and then also would focus us on those areas where we should be discussing this with the applicants or developers, the potential concession from the city perspective, in exchange for some benefits, public benefits, right? So this is about to just address this relationship between these two documents, right? So from the perspective of public benefits and the other one, the opposite side is the pretty much applicant's benefit or zoning benefit, right? So first of all, I think that in terms of this, what somebody already addressed, right, about the benefits, right, it should be an extrinsic benefit to the commercial side of the project of the applicant. In this case, that pretty much we would like to have this benefit, this public benefit, that is not realized in the original application of the developer, right? It could be housing, affordable housing, that would be part of the project, or it would be outside, right? But we should not be allowing some public benefits that would be enhancing and just truly giving benefit to the project itself, because then otherwise it's just the clarity of this, the public benefit, it's not specifically defined, right? It would benefit rather the development on the specific lot as the public. So from perspective, and I talked about in the past, right, about how we can define both. So we would need to somehow establish some sort of definition and clarity what both the zoning benefit and public benefit would mean, and then of course to make sure that that applicant or developer knows where he stands very early. There would have to be categories. Then of course that may be defined further in a granular detail by the council, but then it would just bring the clarity early to the process, to the developer, that he knows where he stands, right? This is something that I could just, subsidize, and then in exchange I could get some benefit in terms of the height encroachment or some other aspects, right? So then if we have these categories of benefits, public benefits that developer knows that he may achieve, and then maybe specific projects, then maybe there would not be a need to just go very quickly to the council to discuss it, because pretty much everything is clear, right? So why would we bother, right? We're within the clear process. There is no need to just go and just have specific negotiations, right? The process is clear, unless it's a large project, right? That maybe would have to be like a exception or in the process, or maybe two-step process, right? That if you fall within the parameters, you're fine. If you go beyond that, you're not fine, right? And then from this perspective, I can take another 2 minutes, or thank you. So then. We may establish stack ranking, right, for both, right? For example, so this is from the perspective of the public benefits, right? That, for example, this is on our first rank of addressing, this is on the second. From the perspective of them benefits, just making sure that we exchange something for something, right? We can either just, monetize them, just, convert them to the dollar value, or convert them to some points. And then developer of applicant would know, and public would also know, right, that if he goes over the height limit by, let's say, 10 feet, right, it would be, I don't know, benefit of $5 million of the net present value. And then for this $5 million, you would look up the list, right? And here there are 2 items for $5 million at the top, right? So that would be immediate clarity, and we would know what we can exchange for what, right? So maybe I will come back to some other comments later on, but this is just a big. Thank you.
Commissioner King.
Thank you. How many minutes are we doing this round? Is it 5? Okay, thanks. Let's see. Okay, thank you. I'll echo the comments that the chart's very helpful. I would say that I think, particularly in that, due to its popularity, it may be of continued use. And I would like to make sure that the things you mentioned are corrected, which are, because one of my big concerns is the double dipping. I think we've discussed this, where we have had applicants come and present as benefits mitigations that would be required regardless of PC status. And so I'd like to make sure that this chart does not reflect any double dipping. And I think you mentioned that the JCC project, some of those that might be in the chart were not actually public benefits. They were BMR, that they got something else for providing the BMR units. They got something else under state housing law. Is that correct?
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. They identified as a public benefit a variety of residential uses. That's all that it reads. It doesn't explicitly state the number of BMR units, but the BMR program triggered the development of 24 units. So while it's not identified as a public benefit, they did provide 24 BMR units.
But that was, even if it were not PC, that would have been there. That would have existed as
Correct.
Part of the state law BMR. Okay.
As part of the city's BMR program.
City's BMR program.
Correct.
Okay, but regardless of where it were PC. So I'd like to make sure so I'm not quite sure which ones you're talking about, but any of those where you have mentioned something that were not explicitly a public benefit to attain the PC status that would have existed regardless of PC, that those are clearly shown as not a public, it should not be a, maybe you would say at the top of this column, public PC public benefits or something of that nature. Does that make sense? Are you guys following that? Okay. So, well, for instance, I'm looking at, so on Altair Walk, so those 56 BMR senior apartments, were those as part of the state or city housing bonus?
Those were explicitly identified as a public benefit. I'd have to go back and cross-check what the requirements are for that site to see if the BMR program required them to have a certain number of units of BMRs.
Okay. So I can't say the one thing I'm clear on is that we should not be letting applicants and are showing what has happened in the past be reflecting a public benefit that resulted from the PC process separate from the BMR units being used to get a developer enhancement, separate from the PC process.
If I can just clarify, am I right that you're saying we should be clear when BMR units are being provided because they're required versus when they're being required because they're a public benefit?
Yes, although, yeah, exactly, correct.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. We can try and do that.
Okay. Because really we didn't get anything as the public benefits as the city, we didn't get anything extra if they would have been built anyhow under the previous zoning. Okay. Let's see. And then, and I know the amount of work may be not realistic to ask, but in this trigger for PC, when, for instance, they say, they'll say that density and such, it would be valuable, but again, I know it may be an insurmountable amount of work to show what could have been built under the existing zoning at that time. And I know there are some that probably may not have had existing zoning, or it was, so I'm, the one thing that this gives us is general categories, but not specifics of how big was a project, 1,000 square feet larger than it might have been because we needed to do these things. So that would be, the more information would be valuable. Then from the big picture, so if we do weighting in the previous times when we've done motions and we did weighting and did we did straw polls, it was really binary. Does it pass or does it not pass? And so it seems that would not be in my mind, that would not be the best way. It should not be binary. If we do a straw polls on these, we should actually retain the count of how many commissioners supported versus did not support, so that we don't lose information, because it may be 1 to 6, which is quite different than 3 to 4, right? And then lastly, in trying to figure out a framework for going forward, looking at, okay, what's right with the PC, what's not right. One of the things in looking at this matrix that I see is that, and others may want to slice and dice slightly differently, but for me, some of them are a nonprofit creation of a project perceived to serve the community, not otherwise available, such as the below market rate housing, senior housing, things that are really just that the community is perceived to believe that we want more below market rate housing and that we're willing to change existing zoning, work outside of existing zoning, or senior housing, those types of things. And for me, those types of projects seem a perfect fit for the PC type process. The other, then you moving down what in my mind is a continuum. Then there's the for-profit creation of a project perceived to serve the community, not otherwise available. And so these might be, let's see, Sunrise of Palo Alto, which is for-profit and yet provides senior housing. There was the recent one, Channing House, similar, for-profit, someone's making money, and yet it fulfills a perceived benefit that wouldn't have been available to the community. Those are, to me, less clear that they're the value to the community. And then next would be a for-profit project strictly for profit, not generally perceived to benefit the community in and of its own, but then offering some public benefit, either usually often with funds or amenities related to or not related to the project itself. And so if we're trying to, my thought is that we should look at that as a framework, splitting the PC into its separate components, what has been done, and looking at those portions separately. Thank you.
Vice Chair Keller.
Yes, thank you. So let me make a couple of observations first. And the observation is that one of the findings for a planned community zoning, if I remember correctly, is that no standard zoning rules apply. And in order to have a PC, you can't use a standard zoning. And that's part of the reason why mixed use, as was mentioned by staff, in the zoning ordinance update in the 2007 timeframe, a lot of mixed use rules were put into effect, in particularly for the CN zone and the CS zone, describing what that is. So zoning rules have changed over time. In addition, the housing density bonus law now exists, which provides some sort of escape for zoning rules to the extent that there is some amount of below market rate housing. One of the things that the council chose to do differently than the commission when we looked at the housing density bonus law is the commission had an idea that when you had a project that was 100% affordable housing, then it was possible for there to be additional concessions considered. And at the urging of the public, the council took out that provision. So let me throw out first an idea about how this could happen. Let us suppose the PC zone were limited to either projects that were primarily or exclusively BMR or senior housing. And that's because of the housing density bonus law restriction on that. Secondly, it applies to PC amendments because you have to be able to amend an existing PC, and the only way to do that is to have a new PC that amends the existing PC or change it to an existing zoning. And the third thing is public projects, because you're not going to have a standard project, a standard zoning for a public safety building or a parking garage. So if you think about that as the limit of PC zoning, and then anything that doesn't fit into that category either happens through a precise plan process, for which there's a well understood process for how to deal with it. In particular, SOFA 1 and SOFA 2 had a precise plan process that was arduous but successful. And I don't think anybody can argue that they're not successful, but they're quite arduous, and I'm not sure why there's an allergy on the staff to having precise plans or area plans done in the future. I think we should try doing more of them instead. Secondly, for things that don't fit into that, there is also the possibility of development agreement, which provides for an increased potential for discussion of public benefits in a process in which there's more flexibility and the ability to ask for more things like pro formas, or if you desire, what one thing was mentioned by Commissioner King is what the value of the project would be under existing zoning and what the value of the project would be in an appraisal with the, as proposed, then you can try to capture some of that value. You can do that better in the development agreement. Now, in terms of the process, let me suggest that the process could be preliminary review by the council in a study session, not a formal action, followed by the PC initiating with recommendations, which doesn't exist now. Right now, we initiate, we approve it or don't approve it, but we actually don't make formal recommendations. In this case, we would make formal recommendations. That would be tracked through the staff and ARB review process as the PC moves forward. Then that comes back to the PTC, where we have the potential for recommending to council, and we get feedback on the recommendations we made, which were not requirements, but we actually get feedback on them, and we see how they were changed or whether they were followed, and then finally the council approve. One thing on this is that, first of all, we should be willing to say no early on projects we don't like, instead of wasting the developer's time and the public's time on projects that we think are ridiculous. And in terms of that, what happens is that if you have such a situation, then we don't get into a scenario that sometimes happens where we say, well, developers spend so much money on that, let's just approve it. We should try to avoid that by stopping it early. And finally, in terms of ex parte communication, which was brought up, I think that the Commission should relook at its policies on ex parte communications, firstly, and we have gone back and forth on that a couple of times. But in particular, it should apply to PCs, development agreements, and quasi-judicial matters. And perhaps there could be a recommendation to Council in terms of it increasing their avoidance of ex parte communications prior to the final PC recommendation to Council. Thank you.
So I just have a couple of comments to add to the very thoughtful and excellent comments from my colleagues. First, just to very enthusiastically concur that the data is extremely helpful. So thank you for that, and this sets a new standard of quality that we hope is possible to attain on other issues of similar importance. It's very helpful to have data to have proper analysis and leading to good decisions and good public policy. So I've been on the Commission not quite 3 years, and there have been not quite 3 PCs during that time. The one PC was the 101 Lytton, which stimulated, I think, a very chaotic, almost random discussion at the PTC of what on earth is a public benefit, and led directly to the work by esteemed Chairman Martinez, my colleague, Commissioner Alchek, and myself on the colleagues' memo on public benefits, which I think is still relevant in terms of posing questions at the end of the memo for what maybe should go into the revision of the ordinance. But I won't belabor that at the moment. The very limited data that I have with just the 101 Alma, the Edgewood Plaza, and then the El Camino Page Mill project, which is on hold, is that and I guess Maybell had also the PC aspect, so 4, was that there seemed to be a pattern, and this is a very limited data set, of applicants seeking to do something more than was allowed by existing zoning in terms of the development of the land, either more units, more floor area, a little more height, reduce setbacks, something that would give them a chance to create something that would be more valuable, more useful, maybe more beneficial to the public, but not permitted under existing zoning. There seems also to have been an opportunity to ask for doing something less than might otherwise been required in terms of maybe number of parking spaces, or who knows what requirement that might have been avoided as a result of the approval of the PC. So either getting something more or avoiding a requirement that would otherwise be applicable. And in each case, it's again very limited data. This seems to be of economic value to the applicant. Hence the sense that was the public being treated fairly, whether it's the existing neighborhood or the adjacent, the most impacted area, or the city overall in terms of the bargaining for that went on between the applicant and the staff and the commission and the council and so on, which led to some suspicion that maybe this wasn't a great process. But now that we have the data, we can see this more objectively. And I think that it's I think it's been recognized by the work of the staff, the comments from the commissioners, the people who've come from the public to make very, very useful and relevant comments, and former planning commissioner Phyllis Castle, who came during a time when there was 26 PCs during her tenure on the commission, many of which are on, maybe not on your chart because they predated, but were things that were beneficial to the public and couldn't have been achieved through existing zoning and were consistent with a comprehensive plan. So with that, I've identified, I think, 4 broad areas where we might use a straw vote process to get the sense of the commission, and some of these questions have subparts. If, with the indulgence of my colleagues, in the interest of time, let's just go with my list. And at the end, if there's something that we want to vote on that we didn't get a chance to vote on, then we'll maybe try to identify that. So the first question I have is, since the council has indicated that the PC zoning is on hiatus or timeout, is whether we feel that the PC zoning process should resume. The first subpart is whether we think it should resume promptly. And then the second part, we vote separately, is should it resume only after revision of the ordinance? And if this is a clearly defined question, if you really feel strongly about this, you can raise both hands. No, we'll count your votes.
Chair Michael, I'm sorry to interject so soon in this process because this is trending in a great direction. I just wanted to make sure the Commission was aware that the study session is noticed as discussing reforms and alternatives.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether your suggestion to talk about the Council's timeout is appropriately in that context or not.
Well, it leads to the alternatives. I mean, I think, and it's non-binding, so it's not. I mean, it's a big whoop. I mean, really. Who cares what we think?
Yes,
we care. Okay.
So, I'm sorry, Chair Michael, for those listening at home, it might be helpful just to explain the Commission's history behind straw polls and study sessions. Of course, in study sessions, you can't take any action. This was not noticed as a public hearing. It will not result in any formal action. But of course, it's fine as a matter of just codifying some of the comments in a way that helps report recommendations to council to have a straw poll, and that's what the Commission is doing at this point.
Okay. Thank you. So, bearing in mind that what we're doing is just trying to capture our feelings, do we feel that it would be beneficial for the PC zoning process to resume promptly? Should the city start processing PC zoning applications promptly? All in favor? All opposed? So 4-2. Did you abstain?
I have a different perspective, so that would be a different question. Sorry for this.
3-2, 1 abstention. So the next subpart of this is should the resumption of PC zoning happen only after amendment of the ordinance?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I couldn't hear.
Should resumption of PC zoning applications only proceed after revision of the ordinance? And then no? So that's 3-3 with Commissioner Alchek particularly enthusiastic. Yes.
Would it be okay if you asked the ancillary question, which is, would you support both processes happening at the same time? The revision process, so that there isn't, you understand?
Okay. Third subpart.
Wait, can I ask a quick question? So on the last vote, there were 7 people voting. How could it be 3-3?
Thank you.
Oh, I miscounted.
And comparably, wasn't the previous vote, shouldn't there have been 6 total? And I think we came up with 5 total.
There was one abstention. It was.
I think last
We've
vote
got
was
7 minus
4-2.
1.
Okay, let's recount. So I'm new to the straw polling. I apologize. So we're going to have 3 subparts. Resumption of PC zoning promptly, resumption of PC zoning only after revision of the ordinance, or resumption of PC zoning process in parallel with updating the ordinance. And how about you just vote for your favorite? Okay? So how many people want to just resume the PC zoning process irrespective of revision? Okay? 2. How many people would wait to resume PC zoning until after the ordinance has been revised? 3. Would anybody want to have PC zoning process resume immediately, but in parallel with updating the ordinance? 2. 3. Okay. It was 3. Okay.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Tanaka, you changed your vote from which, number 1 or number 2?
Okay. Okay.
Then the
So
second one.
I'm just going to take the liberty of trying to characterize what I'm hearing, and that is that the commission is sensing that there's value to the PC zoning process. There's also value to updating the ordinance, but it's of sufficient importance that it be done with alacrity. You know, that we get back into the business of processing these applications.
I'm sorry, Chair Michael, can I characterize that a little differently? This is a split commission, 2, 2, and 3. Would it be fair to say that the commission as a whole believes this is a very valuable process, that the majority of the commission believes that the use of the PC process should resume either in parallel or subsequent to reforms?
Yes.
Or is that?
Yes. And I would just say that if the reforms were to be particularly protracted, then there would be bias towards resuming it. I mean, I think if it took as long to reform the PC ordinance as it takes to update the comprehensive plan, we should get on with it more quickly than that. Commissioner Rosenblum.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with the interpretation. I think the second vote, I'm in the minority on this, but I think that the majority is saying, let's get on with it. There are only 2 people, myself and the vice chair, saying, let's wait and reform. There's 2 versions. There's one that says, get on with it no matter what happens, and the other, get on with it and begin this reform process. So either way, the majority is get on with it, I think, is my interpretation. It's not a split. Some people say get on with it, some people don't. I think it's the majority was 2. So I would say you said 2, 2, and 3 or something like that, but it's 2 of the options were overlapped on get on with it.
So I think we're cutting with a dull blade here, but I think that there's just as in trying to understand what our thinking is. I think that we've been impressed with the work of the staff to go back and look at the data. To the extent that we have public comment, there seems to be some recognition of PC zoning has been used beneficially in the past, and it would be beneficial to the public if it was resumed, and the ordinance needs some work. Vice Chair Keller.
So I think that it depends on how long the PC process revision ordinance revision takes. It's not going to take the 6 or 7 years that we've been revising the comp plan. It's an ordinance, and an ordinance should take at most a few more months in terms of that process. Secondly, I think that there are particular considerations in terms of things like what are public benefits and how to quantify public benefits, and in fact, exactly what the scope of PCs are, that in my mind argue for not resuming PCs before doing the ordinance, or you may get to a situation of the PCs that happen in the process while the ordinance is being revised and whether they have to change. So I think that the expediency of resuming PCs prior to reforming the ordinance is problematic at best and gets into various issues of grandfathering of the ones in process. So I think that's fundamentally a bad idea, even though I'm in the minority.
So I think we're going to get from Commissioner Alchek a few more questions for our straw polling. But let me go to the next area, and that is to the extent that effort is going to be made by staff and others to look at revisions to the ordinance. This goes to what should go into the revisions. And I think the first one I expect, should there be a definition of public benefit? And let's just vote on that. Should there be a definition of public benefit in the revised ordinance? Any votes no or abstaining?
I have to abstain. I have a hard time codifying it, but I'm not.
Okay, so 6 in favor of having a definition of public benefit and 1 abstention. Another is, what should, in the revised ordinance, there be included a menu of allowable public benefits?
It depends.
Okay.
Depends.
Okay, so opposed? Abstaining? So that's 2-2-2? Yeah, so we had 2-2-2 and then 1 person didn't vote. So there's 2-2-2 and 1. So we're probably expressing some consternation about what the menu would look like, and so that probably is an area that needs more work before we could endorse the direction that we don't understand where it would go. Sure.
I think for me, the reason I abstained is because the scope of the PCs, to me, affects what the public benefit menu is. If the scope of the PCs is, as I recommended, be BMR or senior housing or PC amendments or public projects, then it's clear that we could define a scope of what the public benefits are and we'd understand them. On a standard menu of that. On the other hand, if we have a broader scope of the public benefit of the what the PC zone applies to, then I have more heartburn as to the ability to create a menu of public benefits.
Okay, so the menu idea may be more problematic, although the definition may be something that we are more excited about. Then question, should, in the revision of the ordinance, there be some requirement for independent economic analysis or pro forma disclosure by the applicant? Unanimous.
If I can just make a comment again, there, if it were, if it's a nonprofit, somebody developing below market rate housing, and it's a nonprofit, I'm not really concerned about the pro forma because there's no one making a profit. So that one's a little tricky for me. I voted for it, but that's
okay.
Tricky.
So in the work that was done by Commissioner Alchek and Chair Martinez and myself, one of the concepts that we discussed in the colleagues' memo was the difference between public benefit, which was in the nature of the project itself, or we refer to as an intrinsic public benefit. Maybe that would be below market rate housing or senior housing or public plaza or something like that. Public art, or something that was extrinsic, maybe improvement of the traffic signal 4 to 8 blocks away, or payment into a parking fund or something. And I think that the relevance of the economic analysis pro forma disclosure probably bears primarily where you're unable to find an intrinsic public benefit to the nature of the project itself, and you have to look for, there's actually economic value being created in the upzoning, and you got to pay for it. And if so, how much? But anyway, let's kind of, Vice Chair Keller.
So even for the process of affordable housing development, there may be a situation in which an economic analysis is worthwhile. And although I'm loath to take this as an example, but if you look at the Maybell project, part of the issue there was how many market rate units were needed to pencil out the project. And to the extent that we had more exposure to those numbers, I think that that may have affected the outcome of the PC process and may have affected the outcome of the election. So I think that the fact that the numbers were not transparent made it hard for the Palo Alto Housing Corp to make their case adequately. And also hard for us to really understand how many market rate housing units were really needed to pencil that out.
Okay. So thanks, Vice Chair Keller. The next question I have is process. Now, here the ordinance specifically calls for the PC zoning to be initiated by the Planning and Transportation Commission. The practice in recent years has been for something to happen prior to that, which is referred to as preliminary review by council, or what Vice Chair Keller is suggesting might be more elegantly done as a study session of by council, and then the Planning Commission initiates. However, I'm not sure whether the semantics of this are clear. If the council is having a preliminary study session, are they in fact initiating? Which I'm totally comfortable with the council initiating the zoning change and then sending it to the ARB and the PTC for work on the details. But if the Planning and Transportation Commission is currently required to initiate, that seems to me not the current practice. So my question is, should the ordinance be revised to provide for initiation by council?
Sorry, can you restate the question?
Should the ordinance be revised so that a planned community zone is initiated by council? So two people want to clarify the question. Commissioner Gardias?
I mean, it's like in the other case, right? It depends, right? My perspective was different from this side. That if we have a clear process, then council might not need this interest. Of course, we would need to discuss this with council. It's not going to be our decision, right? Or there could be also some projects that would be going beyond, where the scale would go beyond the ordinance, right? So the answer would be depends. Right, so if we have a clear process, then maybe there would not be need for that. If there is some, heavy outlier, then of course, yes.
Okay, Vice Chair Keller.
So firstly, with 101 Linton, there was a preliminary review by council, followed by a initiation by the commission, and I think that the initiation by commission was perhaps went on for several meetings, and I think that was a more reasonable process than what happened on Alma Plaza or Alma Village, where the commission declined to initiate the project, and council initiated the project as an ordinance that locked things into place. And I think that in this particular situation, I don't know anybody who likes the result of the Alma Village approach. So I think that there's an advantage to having the Planning Commission review it even before initiation. And in particular, my understanding is that on 101 Linton, that was a study session. It was not, the preliminary reviews are study sessions. They're not agendized as an action item. Maybe staff could clarify that for us.
Yes, Cara Silver, Senior Assistant City Attorney. Study sessions do not initiate PCs. However, I think that in the recent history, the council and the applicant has requested a study session with the council, not to technically initiate the PC, but to get a sense of whether it was worth going through the very long, lengthy process, and whether council was open to a PC, get some initial feedback.
Yeah, so the vote would be, to the extent that the ordinance now states explicitly that the PC is initiated by PTC, is any change needed to this part of the ordinance? For example, it could be changed so that the PTC is initiated by council, or it could be changed. The PC is initiated by council, or is that prior to initiation by the PTC that there would be a preliminary study session review by council? But in other words, should the ordinance be revised to clarify exactly what the role of council is at the beginning of the process?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Can I offer an alternative?
Okay, let me, before Vice Chair Keller sort of clarifies my question, my question is coming from the fact that as I sort of experienced these few projects that have been on our agenda in the last couple of years, that the role of the PTC has not been as provided in the ordinance in terms of having the formal initiation of the council, because something happens before, and what happens before is very weighty. It really determines kind of the viability or the nature or the conditions or the parameters of the project, and we have essentially sort of ratified what was done before we initiated. So I think for me, that's tantamount to the council initiating the PC, which is perfectly okay. But I think that would, to me, to be, with my legal background, appropriate to revise the ordinance to say council initiates.
I think that they're qualitatively different.
So Vice Chair Keller is going to clarify my thinking.
So firstly, the formal action of the Planning Commission to initiate a PC is qualitatively different than the council initiating a PC without commission review or analysis. So those are qualitatively different. If the council initiates the PC, then the Planning Commission has no role except to review it on the way back. And I think that's completely inappropriate. But I think it seems to me that there are really three alternatives. One alternative is to have the current process where the council optionally does a study session, where the Planning Commission initiates the PC, and if it declines to, then the council has the option to initiate the PC or send it back and say no. That's one option. The second option is to have the council initiate the PC and the Planning Commission role relegated to review it on the way back and not have any comments to it on the initial process. And the third thing, which is a variation of the first one, if you will, is to not have the council do a study session in advance. And I'm actually not going to suggest that, because I don't think we can prohibit the council from doing a study session in advance. That may happen instead. So the issue really is, do we have the current process where the Planning Commission does the formal initiation after a preliminary review by potential or optional preliminary review by council, or do we remove the Planning Commission's role entirely from that initiation process and have the council initiate it, with the risk that we may get an Alma Plaza process occur?
So I think Vice Chair Keller's comments are well taken and certainly well informed. And I think just to simplify, since we're not going to do the revision of the ordinance on the fly, that would not be within our competency. The question is simply whether that that particular section of the ordinance that refers to initiation by the PTC be clarified in some respect to reflect the actual process that the city should follow. And so this is a vote on whether that should be clarified.
Clarified how?
In some way. We're not going to, it's too complicated for us to kind of work through that without more caffeine.
Chair, maybe I can be, maybe it's because I have two really young children, but I think I can be of assistance here. This is going to be a little more, just allow me a minute. Show of hands. Who would support a process that was initiated, so a PC process that must be initiated by council first? Okay, no show of hands. Who would support a process that would be initiated by PTC before council was involved? That's the current. That it, well, it sort of is and it sort of isn't. So there's
it's the current ordinance.
I think that was 4 hands. 4 individuals represented that they would prefer the process be initiated by PTC rather than council. I could go on with more questions.
Commissioner Gardias.
It's just an addition to this, right? I just believe that the role of council needs to be clarified, not necessarily this particular paragraph that's currently in the ordinance, right? But definitely we need to clarify council's role in defining or dictating public benefits, right? Which would be pretty much separation of duties, and this is something that Commissioner Alczyk before talked about, right? So one way or the other, there would have to be some change in the ordinance that would redefine the role of council in the process.
I think we can take a vote on that. How many in favor of the proposition from Commissioner Gardias to clarify the role of council in the process? Okay, that seems to be unanimous. So the next question, and I don't know if we can get into sort of subparts, but I think broadly the ordinance should be revised to provide a reasonable enforcement mechanism with potentially alternative ways of enforcement and monitoring. Vice Chair Keller.
No, you were asking for.
Oh, okay, vote. All in favor of an enforcement mechanism, as I said. Any opposed? No, that's unanimous. Okay.
I'm sorry, was that 6-1 or 7-0?
7-0.
7-0, thank you.
Okay, so that's enforcement and monitoring. And we didn't get into the specifics of how you would enforcement. Commissioner Gardias.
I know that it just adds to the time that we're spending on this, right? But in terms of the enforcement, right, I had a thought about this, right? So enforcement, yes, but of course the question is in what way, right? So from perspective of Palo Alto and also the agreement, it may be wise just to structure the agreement so no enforcement would be necessary, because of course it would be costly, right? So if we were going to get to the details, my perspective would be just to minimize or some structure the agreement for the public benefit, so that pretty much is just a one-time benefit that doesn't need the enforcement down the road. Thank you. Okay.
I think there's some complexity to this, but it's probably a topic of more work and further discussion. The next item is, as we focused on PC zoning, one of the things that we've considered is to achieve the same objectives. I think this was in the staff report. Sometimes other communities use development agreements, or they may use development agreements and or PC zoning, not necessarily one or the other. And the question is whether Palo Alto should consider increasing the use of development agreements where appropriate. All in favor?
I don't know about this.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstaining?
I abstain.
Okay, so 4 in favor and 3 abstaining on the basis of we haven't had sufficient airing of what a development agreement entails and what are the consequences of that, or what are the pros and cons.
Sorry.
Commissioner Gordius.
I'm sorry, Chair, for just taking another time, right? I mean, this is just for this vote, right? I just want to be clear. Just it's not for the sake of just increasing the number of the development agreements. If we establish the process that would allow us just to cut down on the number of the development agreements, that would be my preference.
Well, so as far as I understand it, in recent years, the number of applications for PC zoning has been rare. So in some cases, somebody might, where they couldn't proceed under existing zoning to complete their project, or that they wouldn't be able to provide public benefit under the existing zoning. But if the PC zoning itself was an inappropriate mechanism, should they or could they propose a development agreement instead? I think the answer is, if we understood more clearly what a development agreement would entail, we think it would be a useful tool to allow flexibility for Palo Alto in certain situations where the PC zoning is sort of a catch-all that isn't necessarily perfect. Vice Chair Keller.
So, firstly, I think that if we were to use development agreements more frequently, the two development agreements we've had in the recent past are involving the Stanford Mayfield playing fields and Stanford Medical Center expansion. So if we were to go beyond and have more development agreements, then we would need a development agreement ordinance that would have a further description of that. But my understanding of state law, and I realize I'm not a lawyer, is that we have more flexibility in terms of what we can require with respect to development agreements than we may be able to do it in PCs.
Okay, so noted. And then well, let's see. I'm going to give Commissioner Alczek's questions back to Commissioner Alczek. Here.
Okay, so we've had a lot of time to think about this. This is not, don't feel scared to vote on this, all right? Just some quick questions. Show of hands. Would you support a process that didn't treat every exception the same? I'll rephrase. Would you support a process that treated the, exceeding height differently than exceeding density? Or would you, if you don't raise your hand, then you're suggesting in this question that you would support a process that treated each exception to our zoning code the same? Meaning, would you support a process where exceeding a certain limitation, certain limitations would be require greater public benefit than other? All right, I'll just keep going. Let me go through more questions. Should the city council be the sole determining party of what a public benefit is?
So I think the charter of the Planning Commission is advisory body recommending to the council, and the council
right.
has, so I think not sole but ultimate.
Ultimate.
Okay.
Okay. There's no show of hands there. Are there members of the commission that would support a PC process that included a payment towards the development of a public benefit? That four hands. Okay. Another question along the lines of how long a public benefit should be enforced. Would you support a process that required the enforcement of a public benefit for the lifetime of the development? Would you support a process that's five?
I'm sorry, we didn't get the vote on.
It's five hands supported that.
Okay, public benefit, life of project.
Would you support a process where enforcement was 30 years, but not more than 30 years? Okay, that's 2 hands. Would you support a process where enforcement, the enforcement of the public benefit was only 20 years? Okay, no hands. I'm just one more. Would you prefer? I'll ask 2 questions. Should a PC be allowed everywhere in the city?
So your answer is yes.
If you wouldn't, okay, the alternative would be, would you support a PC process that was limited to certain physical zones of the city? Okay, so there was 2 that supported anywhere in the city, 4 that support some physical limitation to the location of the PC process. That's all I have right now.
So the final question I had, which I held back on, but was directly following Commissioner Olczyk's last question, was that PC zones should be considered where, or only where relevant to high-level policies in the comp plan, including specific plans or precise plans for particular districts. So I'm saying that where now the ordinance says that the PC zone should be consistent with the comp plan, I'm saying that the comp plan should be more proscriptive, and lay out the intention of the city where PC zones would be encouraged, and particularly through the use of specific plans and precise plans. Yes, Vice Chair Keller.
I think that precise plans and specific plans are an alternative to PC zoning, and that precise plans or specific plans are those that specify what more detailed analysis of the zoning should be. Think about SOFA 2. It basically had its own set of zoning rules that applied to the different parcels in there, and therefore PCs would become superfluous, because it would be unnecessary to do in a zone where you had that, or an area where you had the precise plan. So it's an alternative, not an and.
Well, it's possible. You may know more about this than I do, but I suspect that, let's say you have a California Avenue area concept plan, or a downtown precise plan, and you do the zoning update, and then something comes along and it doesn't fit. And somebody says, well, we'd like to do this land use, but it just doesn't fit the existing zoning, even though you've got the concept area plan, or even you got the precise plan. So we'd like to propose it because it would confer public benefit, even though when the zoning update was done, it didn't allow it exactly. So I don't totally accept the logic of your practical, advice. Go ahead.
There's a difference between a precise plan and a concept area plan. A concept area plan does not do parcel by parcel analysis in detail, and as, for example, SOFA 1 and SOFA 2 did. So if you subtract out concept area plans, which are a whole nother beast, if you think about precise plans, for example, if you look at the precise plan that is being done at San Antonio Shopping Center, okay, that's looking at that parcel and looking at the detailed analysis of what you want in there. That's an alternative to a PC. You don't need a PC there because that's specifying what you're going to do there. It's a design. If we have a precise plan for Fry's, we don't need a PC there. The Fry's site will actually detail design what we want.
Okay. Let me try to rephrase my question.
Yeah, Chair Michael, maybe I can make a suggestion. I think you're suggesting something that builds off the last question, which is that PCs should only happen where the comp plan says it's okay, whether it's through a policy in the comp plan or a concept area plan that's within the comp plan. Is that
yes,
where you're
pretty
heading?
much, yeah.
Okay.
So
let's vote on it. Let's
voting on Director Gittleman's insight. All in favor? So that was 4 in favor and 3 no votes.
Do you want to see if the no votes were abstain or no?
Yeah. So let's have a final round. So we did the straw voting. It was a little chaotic, but hopefully it was useful in terms of seeing where we had a a split of views. That's true. But let's have everybody have a chance to make any final comments that they want, and this is a really important topic, and let's give everybody 5 minutes. Director Gittleman.
Yeah, Chair Michael, there's one particular thing that would be helpful. I think when it came to the discussion of, should there be a menu of public benefits, there were at least a few commissioners who said it depends. And so if the commissioners in their final comments those of them who thought it depended, could clarify their views on that, it would be very helpful.
Okay. So each commissioner can use their 5 minutes however they would like, and Vice Chair Keller would like to ask some straw polling questions in his time. So who wants to go first? Commissioner Rosenblum.
I thought this was a pretty useful exercise, so thanks for doing it. I am glad you asked the question about the menus. So I want to address a couple of the votes quickly. And my vote, I abstained on the first and said no to the menu. The first was, should there be a definition at all? I've been thinking about, in the colleagues' memo, there was a lot of time spent around the definition of public benefit. And so I looked at some other examples of this. I think it's super hard. When I looked at the list of projects, especially the ones that I consider quote unquote good projects, which I realize is very subjective, it would have been very hard for me to write a public benefit menu or even definition that would have encompassed those. So I'm suspicious of like the Napoleonic code of public benefits and us getting everything down. I think it's tough, and I think it's going to be pinning us into a corner. But I will defer to those who know more about this, but I'm suspicious. Then in terms of the vote around some specific policy recommendations, so Commissioner Alchek asked a series of questions, would you support this for 20 years or 30 years? I think there's a series of questions that in a different forum we might come to a better answer when we're actually drafting policy. I think it's hard in this forum. Like after I abstained on 30 years, and then I thought, well, maybe, the lifetime of projects go on for a long time. Do we really want to enforce a project that is now in its 50th year? Or are we going to check to see if that, parking space that, needs to now accommodate hover cars is now working? But no, in all seriousness, there's probably some min length and max length of project enforcement after. But I don't think that we can really contemplate those things in this kind of straw poll setting. But I think there are probably a list of those things that would simplify drafting. So I want to clarify a couple answers on. So there are some things that some of us might have voted no because we oppose, and some things to abstain because we just probably need more information on, but doesn't indicate lack of enthusiasm. In particular, some of the policy strictures, very specific questions that Commissioner Alchek were asking, I think are really important ones that could probably be answered, but would need a little bit of staff input to be able to say, do we enforce for 20 years or 30 years or the length of the project, no matter how far it goes. And those were the only clarifying things I wanted to put for this process.
Commissioner Alchek.
Okay, I always think the straw poll is like borderline insanity because it's very difficult to actually accomplish an effective straw poll in this format, but I applaud the effort. I too want to sort of echo Commissioner Rosenblum's comment about the public benefit. I participated in the memo, and I at the time felt very strongly that the failure to define it was a problem. I'm now beginning to believe that the failure to define it is actually an opportunity for the public benefit to evolve. I think public benefits should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. I think that the community, in the worst-case scenario, always has a referendum if they feel like we've exceeded our authority, and ultimately, this goes kind of hand in hand with the enforcement. I actually think enforcement should be a case-by-case basis. This notion that, for example, a child daycare center is, for example, a public benefit, that's a specific use. 10, 20 years from now, maybe that use is not really as beneficial to the public, and maybe that enforcement it would be, in that case, limited. we have these uses that are public benefits. Take, for example, the idea of, what do we call the development, the Arriaga proposal, what was that referred to as? 27 University. Let's say the public benefit there was supposed to be a theater. That's not necessarily a public benefit just for the immediately surrounding local community. That's a public benefit for the greater Bay Area. And I would argue that on a case-by-case basis, we should be evaluating how those public benefits sort of weigh. Does a public benefit enhance the image and pride of Palo Alto? Or does a public benefit provide a park for the 1,500 feet of residents that surround it? I think there's opportunity in the lack of a definition. Let me just put it that way. I would support a process that was exclusively initiated by the City Council. I'll repeat that. I would support a process that was exclusively initiated by City Council. I think that if they weighed in, it would give the developers of these projects a lot more of a comfortable process, because they would know sort of what the expectations of the City Council was prior to their beginning of the process. So say, for example, the City Council said to them, we generally support this type of project and this benefit, but we would really want X, Y, and Z. We'd want the public to support it. And so the developer could kind of determine whether or not it's worth continuing as he's in the process, if he's going to meet those goals that they're going to be held accountable to. And frankly, I don't think that would be a problem or inappropriate. I want to say that I'm not sure, and you quoted it, you stated it here that can a public benefit be a menu or should be objective? Can a public benefit be an infrastructure that the community isn't willing to develop on their own? Whereas you wrote a public benefit should not be an infrastructure project. I'm not sure I feel that way. I think that if a particular project came forward and the suggestion was that they would either spend a certain amount of capital in helping us provide a really important need for the community, infrastructure-wise, I think I would be supportive of that sort of PC process. Again, this sort of goes back to the City Council. I think the idea of providing a great deal of flexibility for this 1 or 2 projects a year process is good, because our notion of what a benefit is evolves over time, specifically when it's use related. Right now, senior housing, below market rate housing, that's regardless of whether the state or our city requires it of certain developments, we're still not producing it enough. And so maybe we feel that is a benefit, a greater public benefit that we should be accomplishing, or childcare facility, or a grocery store, and if in 30 years everybody's ordering groceries online, maybe the enforcement of that use, isn't necessary. So I'm kind of going back to that one real quick. Finally, I think one of the main problems I have with the PC process is that when you start it, you just don't know where the end zone is. Right? I haven't actually started one myself, and I don't intend to, but it just seems so unclear, and I think that's why I would support a process initiated by City Council that had a little bit more of a rubric laid out up front of what goals should be, so that we, as a planning commission, participated in the process as the role of the body that helped guide the applicant to satisfy those goals that, let's say, the City Council identified early on. Okay, that's it.
Commissioner King.
Thank you. Let's see. Regarding your question about menus, so I think menus are probably a good tool and appropriate for when we talked about them for the density bonus and have implemented that. But I think for the PC, the goal of the PC is flexibility, and that I agree that we really need the case-by-case, the capacity to determine benefits on a case-by-case basis. And for me, it's important that those benefits are related to the project or its impacts. And I think when we're doing the straw polls, a lot of these things we sort of vaguely all agree on the things we voted on earlier, generally depend on, what ifs. But I think if we're trying to find things that actually divide us, I think one of the things we're on different ends of the spectrum, or potentially, or along the spectrum, are do we want to use PCs as a tool for, how do I write it down? For the sole purpose of exceeding zoning to increase the project value and profits in exchange for some payment that the city will use for an unrelated public benefit. And so I would propose that would be a good straw poll, because we've talked about that, and that kind of, some of these things, both ends of the spectrum, I think, came out in these bullet points in the staff report, so that might be a good straw poll. I'll leave it to Chair if he wants to implement that. And then the other thing, just, the example of the child care center enforcement, and that child care center, why should we monitor that? Well, in that case, that specific case, I believe the applicant wanted that child care center, and so it wasn't we weren't requiring it. If at the initial point of a PC project, the public benefit was a child care center, then I don't know why we wouldn't enforce for whatever we determine the period. In my opinion, that's the length of the project, that public benefit still exists. I think the example last meeting had been a playground that, as part of an HOA, I think, that had been taken out, and that had been an initial public benefit. And then lastly, just to show the spectrum across we all exist, regarding the image and pride as a public benefit, I'm pretty sure Palo Alto has never been accused of having a low self-image. So for me personally, I do not consider that public benefit. In fact, that was one of the things with, I don't know if there's an actual quote, maybe one of those things that, Mark Twain never said it, but the building is the benefit. I'm not a believer that in general, the buildings are the benefit. If somebody brings a proposal for the Space Needle in Palo Alto, maybe as a tourist attraction, then I will rethink that. But if it's strictly a building exceeding existing zoning for its beauty and our self-image and pride, I personally would not support that.
So if the Space Needle were in Palo Alto, it would be 35 feet high. But if you wanted to ask a straw poll question, go ahead.
Do that? Okay. So do we want to allow the PC process or a replacement process for the sole purpose, or is a use of the PC process or a replacement process the sole purpose? Can it be, I didn't phrase that very well, I'll come back and rephrase that, the sole purpose of exceeding zoning to increase project value and profits in exchange for a payment from the developer to a public benefit wholly unrelated to the project itself?
So you should get yes and no in this one. So how many think yes and how many think no?
So yes would be, yes, we want to allow a payment wholly unrelated, that goes to a public benefit wholly unrelated to the project in exchange for exceeding zoning.
Some sense of fair payment.
Yeah, a fair payment, sure.
Can I suggest a rewording of that?
I would entertain that.
Yes, here's my suggestion. Do we want to allow the PC process to be used for a project that has no intrinsic benefit, but for the payment of a sum of money to the city for some unrelated costs?
Yes, that sounds fine. Commissioner Tanaka.
So are you saying that it's automatic approval, or are you saying that we still, as a city, review it?
We would consider that.
We would consider it, but it's not automatic approval, correct? Okay.
So,
Yes.
yeah. But
Yes, so the question is, would we consider use of a PC zone for a project with no intrinsic benefit except for the payment of sums of money for other unrelated city purposes?
And before we say it, should we also add an PC or development agreement? Because really, we're talking about an alternate being a development.
That's why I said PC related process.
Okay. voting yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then no? All right.
That's the vote.
That's the vote.
Yeah.
So 2 in favor and 5 opposed. Commissioner Gardias.
Thank you, Chair. So just coming back to the initial question from Director Gittleman about the benefits, right? Because that's how we started, right? So just let me start with definition, right? I think that any improved ordinance should have definitions that lack thereof is the problems that we are facing. But then we have to make a distinction between the definition in the ordinance and then defining specific benefits. I think that definition of the benefits, public benefits, should be in the ordinance, but the body that would be defining benefits should be City Council. So that's, if we make these distinctions, this would be clear, right? We're not going to just put details in the ordinance. We're going to just put the robust definition about this, what this is about, limit ourselves to certain purpose that would be clear for the public, and but would allow the true elected body to point what really city wants. So that's from the perspective of the public benefit. And then we can just, of course, just talk about this. I talk about that this would be public benefit that was not going to be related to the project, to the commercial side of the project. I also thought that such a definition would talk about that public benefit is a benefit that is unattainable under local market conditions and local housing, or public housing, or low-income housing rather, is one of those benefits that are not attainable under current local market conditions, right? So that's just an example. Going back to the definitions, I think that when we talk about different aspects, right, that in the ordinance there should be also the definition of the zoning benefit. We have a my apologies, I think it's getting late. I think we have a definition of the public benefit. We should also have a benefit of the zoning, which would be for the developer. And then this definition would just allow the developer to see what he may get in exchange, which would be probably floor area ratio, increasing height, maybe zoning setback, and some other aspects, right? They should be listed clearly in the ordinance. Thank you.
Excuse me, if I could clarify that. I mean, this was a point that I think that came up at our last session. I want to make sure I understand. You're saying that the ordinance should define the extent of the variance from the underlying zoning standards that should be allowed. So there should be a max, like if you're asking for increased density, there should be a maximum you could ask for. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that developer should know what benefits he would be allowed to have in exchange for just providing public benefits. And I think that from the perspective of developers' benefits, this is pretty much just going over floor area ratio for the given zoning, right? Going over height, that would be another. So those exceptions should be listed. If you talk about the limit on those, that's another side of the story. I think that part of this definition or part of the ordinance would be some sort of sliding scale that would show the developer or applicant to calculate that if he goes that much over the limit, then he can contribute this much to the public benefits. And then farther he goes away from the mean, then of course less he gets. That's the purpose of the sliding scale, right? Thank you.
Commissioner Tanaka.
Okay, so one reason why I didn't support the idea of having a menu is mainly because of what some of the commissioners said, which is that I think by definition a PC is an exception. If it fit the comp plan and met all the zoning rules, it wouldn't be a PC. It would be just approved without our purview. And so I think by having a menu, it's saying that you could predict what the exception is going to be, which if you could, then it would be in the comp plan already. So I think it's kind of a tough thing to have a menu, just because it is by nature an exception. In regards to who should initiate? One reason why I think that it still should be the PTC that initiates versus the City Council is because I think the City Council, by its role, has many more responsibilities than we do. We focus very much on planning and transportation issues. And I think, one of our functions, although we are a recommending body, I think one of our key functions is actually to help screen things for City Council, to actually look at the crazy ideas and help shape them into something that's not so crazy or something more useful. And I think if I look at the City Council members, they're incredibly busy doing a lot of different things beyond just these kind of issues. So I think it would be derelict for us to say, well, we'll just have them do that, because I think the reason why we're here is actually to do some of that vetting for them. I think the nature of these pieces are very much our experiments. So we're going to see things that are kind of on the edge of things, and they need to be explored. And I think rather than using valuable City Council time, us as appointees should do some of that footwork for them, so that so that they could review better vetted projects versus using valuable City Council time on things that are half-baked. And I think one thing that I heard from just about everyone is I think everyone pretty much agrees about enforcement. I mean, I think how you enforce, how much you enforce, I think it probably has to be case-by-case basis, but I think it has to be fair, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to have public benefits that just disappear after a few years. I think the public benefit is a tough one, and I think it's hard to have a menu, as I mentioned. I think that it is very much a case-by-case basis, and I think that's the nature of an exception. And but I do think having some definition would be good. Although I think it would be a fairly open one, because just as our needs change, I think it's not going to be something that's going to be carved in stone. So I think there'll still be a lot of debate and discussion around it. And my last comment is on the straw vote about the should a developer be able to pay money as a public benefit. And so I and the chair served on IBRC. We know how much the city is in debt right now. Well, not in debt, but there's a backlog, a very substantial backlog on the infrastructure side, and there's many other deficient things that we would love to improve. And I think public benefits can come in the form of exceptional things, like perhaps a grocery store for a neighborhood that can't have one. But I think it could also come in the form of extraordinary financial payments, where if, let's say, a public safety building was taken care of, which we've been wanting for decades, it was taken care of. I think that is a huge public benefit, right? Especially we had a recent earthquake in Napa. What if it was down here? Would we not regret not having a public safety building that we couldn't finance for various reasons? So I think that's why I don't think we could say no to that kind of public benefit either, because and we're fortunate to be a city where there's a lot of developers who want to develop here, and they could actually afford to make large payments to the city, and I think that could be a huge public benefit. But I don't think it should be automatic. I think it should be something that is reviewed carefully and with a lot of consideration. Thank you.
So I'm going to let myself go next. So having served on the IBRIC with Commissioner Tanaka, I think that this question of public benefit, for example, where you have unfunded infrastructure projects, opportunistically where the community lacks the political will to pass a bond measure or otherwise finance something that would meet the community needs. I think being practical and being opportunistic sometimes is expedient, but it's at high risk to public trust, because you get into this sort of a Faustian, negotiation problem. So caution. I think I would go first to the public and say, if you need a police station, if you need a public safety building, you need it, and you should pay for it, and you should build it, and don't ask somebody else to give it to you in exchange for clogging up the traffic forever. On the enforcement question, given that I think this is something that we all seem to think is important, in the in the world of legal remedies, there's often sort of use of injunctions or injunctive relief. And injunctive relief can take two forms. One is against conduct that may cause harm or might violate some requirement, and there may be sort of an injunction requiring performance of a duty. And I think that this issue of whether you have enforcement against something that's undesired versus a requirement, like a requirement that you make a grocery store, or so I think that that concept needs to be considered in further study of how you actually implement enforcement, along with the possibilities of requiring a posting of a performance bond by the applicant, an enforceable indemnity against a financially responsible party, some sort of penalty provision, knowing who to penalize, when and how, or even contractual liquidated damages.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
So my list was performance bond, an indemnity, some penalty provision, knowing who the party potentially liable for those penalties might be, or a liquidated damages provision negotiated upfront, maybe in the development agreement or what have you. So the council and PTC are going to have a joint study session in October. That's we have a joint session with council.
That's right. You do have a joint study session scheduled with council, and our thought was that it would be for, among other purposes, to discuss your annual report to council. It's on October 20th. Okay. So might it be useful, we might think about whether council would be interested in having a conversation with us about the respective roles of council and the PTC relative to PC zoning, if that is ripe for discussion at that time. I want to follow up on that, and that's, I once had a conversation with one of the senior partners in the biggest international law firm in the world, who told me sort of an international lawyer version of a dirty joke. And it was the difference between heaven and hell. And in heaven, the Italians are the cooks, the Swiss run the trains, the Brits run the police, the French are the lovers, and the Germans make the cars. And in hell, the Brits are the cooks, the Italians run the trains, the Swiss are the lovers, the French make the cars, and so on. So I think that, but anyway, so I think in relationship to zoning and PC zoning and whatnot, I think that the relationship between the public and the council, staff, and the commission is, I think if we get the roles sorted out properly, I think this might be heavenly, but as opposed to having cynicism and mistrust. And I think what I see as sort of a worst case situation was something akin to what's gone wrong recently, and that's where there's a suspicion that there's sort of private backroom meetings with individual council members, then with or without some adequate disclosure of ex parte communications, there's sort of a first time before the public, there's maybe a study session, at which point is the public awareness and input happens only then. And then the council does something to initiate what they would like to see happen. But I think what Commissioner Tanaka suggested is that the role of the council in making the ultimate decisions is unchallenged. The role of the council in setting the policy is unchallenged. But I think that it's important for council to delegate to boards and commissions, and particularly the Planning and Transportation Commission, some of the preliminary heavy lifting to vet some of these things so that when they come to council, they're ripe, and that the public has a chance to participate and observe and have input before it gets to council, and weigh in on and eliminate some of the rough edges. So I think, and then my example there came up yesterday in discussions with Director Gittleman and Vice Chair Keller, that the federal court system really achieved a transformational reform when it appointed a court of special jurisdiction over patent litigation, which is the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. And that actually changed the value of intellectual property in America. It created validity
where district court judges previously had been presiding over litigation of patent cases without specific training. And it flipped the enforceability of patents because you had judges who understood patents deciding patent cases as a specialized matter. And I think if the Planning Commission in the future helps develop its competency as a sort of as a center of competency and a center of excellence relative to understanding some of these zoning issues, having the Planning Commission truly exercise that preliminary work, I think, would add value and enhance public trust and actually support the higher functioning of the council in setting policy and making the final decisions. Okay. Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. Waste my time. Okay, so the first thing is about ex parte communications. If ex parte communications take place and there's nothing to be disclosed, then there's no reason to have the meeting. So therefore, they shouldn't happen. If they happen and there's something to be disclosed, then disclose it. But saying that it's cumulative of the public record is useless, firstly. And I have actually made disclosures of ex parte communications that have been quite extensive, and I think that that's what they should be, not just simply nothing, everything cumulative. So firstly, I want to clarify one thing that was voted on before, so I'm going to ask my own voting, and that is how many commissioners believe that the Planning and Transportation Commission should retain some role in the initiation of PC or related zones? All in favor? So that's 6. How many people believe not? So that's 6-1. Okay. Secondly, with respect to public benefits and their duration, some benefits are of one-time duration. For example, a payment towards something is of one-time duration, maybe of one-time duration. Allocation of a land dedication for a certain purpose can be thought of as a one-time dedication because then it's dedicated for that in the future. For example, on El Camino and Page Mill Road, that land dedication was one time, it had a continuous use, but it's essentially a one-time thing that happens. Some things are of long duration for which there's statute on that. Low-income housing has, in some statutes, 30 years, and some other statutes, 55 years duration, depending on the kind of how they finance it and such, and therefore that's well understood. But other things, the project is there for the life of the project. The benefit to the developer is in general there for the life of the project, and therefore the benefits to the public in general, when not otherwise specified, should be for the life of the project. And the developer wishes to cease providing that, the developer can amend the PC and provide an alternative benefit to the public instead. So that's that thing. How many people believe that we should have increased use of precise or concept plans as distinguished from concept area plans, precise plans or specific plans for areas in which we have particular needs for zoning? So I think that that's 4.
This was not clear to me. I just may ask about clarification. Was the relationship to the PC?
Well, the issue is that if we have a particular concern about some kind of particular use that we want to have in a location, that we try to use precise plans or specific plans as a way of accomplishing that. For example, if you think about, say, a specific plan for downtown in order to figure out what we might want in particular places downtown, or the Fry's site, a specific plan for that thinks about what kind of, what we want, the arrangement we want there, rather than a PC process for that. Yes?
One suggestion about straw polls, just in general for everyone, is I think there's 3 votes, 3 possible votes. One is yes, one is no, and one is abstaining, right?
Yes.
And so I think when straw poll votes are like who says yes and there's no chance for no or abstaining. Like on this one, I actually abstained because I don't know enough. The question wasn't clear enough for me, so I would have abstained. But you took it as a no. So that just goes for everyone.
I didn't take it as a no. But anyway, go ahead. Will you add another question?
No, I mean, but just, just coming back, I don't know what we are discussing now, but coming back to the question that you asked, right? I mean, this one can be achieved, independently from the other, right? So you may use the specific plans, you may not need the plans, right? I mean, this is pretty much different consideration, right? I mean, you can have a PC zone ordinance without the mentioning of the specific plans.
No, I'm suggesting that we have specific plans as a way of having an open process for how we do land use in specific areas. And think of that for example, downtown and the Fry site as examples for which a specific plan or precise plan might be useful. Or South El Camino, where we look parcel by parcel and figure out what the development potential for those really are and provide appropriate zoning based on that. That's an example of a precise plan. So my question is, should we have more use of precise plans or specific plans? Should we encourage their use more broadly, more often?
If I may just, I totally agree with the comment, but I think it's not related to the PC zone reform.
Some people may think it's not related. I think it's germane to the topic because it may obviate the need for PC. So I'm just going to ask the question: how many people believe that we should have increased use of precise plans and specific plans? Yes. There are 6 votes yes and no. Abstain. So there were 6 votes in yes, no votes and a nay, and 1 abstention. And I think that Commissioner Olczak, maybe if you want to go for another round from...
I just want to suggest that while I would support specific plans, once a specific plan is adopted 4 or 5 years later or immediately after, it wouldn't necessarily... My vote doesn't suggest that I wouldn't also support a PC process for a site within a specific plan area.
I'm going to continue on, so thank you.
I totally agree with this.
Okay, so
that's my
so that's the first thing there. The second thing so that's the first question: should we have more specific land use through that? The second thing is, should we consider greater use of development agreements as opposed to PCs in areas where we want to have a more detailed discussion of public benefits, in particular when there may be some risk in terms of the nature of payments made. In development agreements, it's easier to make payments of certain kinds. In PCs, it's harder to have payments of certain kinds because of legal aspects. So the question is, should we encourage the use of development agreements rather than PC zones in more situations, for example, those involving payments? Okay, is that clear? People ask what the question is? Yeah.
So I just, some of these are striking me as like, is democracy good sort of questions where, well, yes, but if you phrase them, should we ask staff, give staff direction to study the use of these things as part of our analysis, then I would probably vote yes. But when you're saying, should we use them more, I don't have the information to know that. So I'm just...
Should we encourage staff to look into whether it makes sense to have projects be done under development agreements as opposed to PCs, where there are general things like payments and things of that? Okay, is that reasonable? Okay, how many think that? Do you understand? Is that a good, reasonable question? Okay.
Can I just interpose a hypothetical?
Yes.
In the last couple of years, one of the great land use questions that's unresolved is 27 University.
Yes.
And so 27 University provoked a lot of discussion, a lot of study, a lot of resistance, and the question of what land use is appropriate for that site is still unresolved. It was tending to go forward as it might have been a PC application, but it might have worked better if it had been considered as a development agreement. Yeah. Or it might have worked better if the city created a precise plan for the downtown area, including 27 University, and then what was done there could be affected as a result of the precise plan.
Yes.
And so I think the kind of sophistication, flexibility suggested by the staff report is that cities may use one or the other of these tools with respect to their land use processes where appropriate in order to achieve the best result. And I think that we're kind of suggesting that we should use different tools that are available to the city, not just the same one, which is kind of a square peg in a round hole and creates a lot of public acrimony.
Well, let me put it this way. We have here 20 some odd projects that are PCs since 2000. We have, I'm not sure exactly the timing of them, but 2 precise plans that have been done in that years or more in terms of SOFA 1 and SOFA 2. Yeah. We have had 2 development agreements that occurred, both involving land with Stanford. So the issue is it's pretty clear that we're using the PC process and not using the other 2 processes. So the first question is whether we should make more use of precise plans, and there was a sentiment in favor of that. So let me ask whether we should explore using using more often development agreements as opposed where there currently might have, where in the past PCs were used for that. So in favor of that? Do people understand the question? So the question is, should we consider...
I understand the question. I don't understand enough about development.
Should we consider greater use of development agreements in situations that previously used PCs?
So you have some abstentions, but...
Yes, I'll ask that. So how many in favor? 3. How many no? 2. And how many abstentions? 2. So we have 3 in favor, 2 opposed, 2 abstentions. Okay, great. The next, let's see. Let me see anything else. I think that's it for me. I think that based on that, I don't have to ask any more questions. Thank you.
Okay, well, this is sort of a marathon. I'm going to suggest that we bring it to conclusion. Can I just ask, we've given you a lot of input. Hopefully some of it makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all of your suggestions and the votes this evening. We've tentatively put this on the council's agenda for a study session on October 6th. That is subject to change, but we obviously will bring forward the commission's thoughts in the form of the transcript and try and convey as best we can the sentiments of the commission.
This might actually be something that would be worthy of an executive summary, because I think the transcript is going to be somewhat lengthy. And if it's not obvious what that should look like, maybe we could collaborate to make it useful.
Thank you.
Okay. We have minutes to approve.
Move as amended.
All in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Motion to second.
Motion by Chair Michael, seconded by Vice Chair Keller.
Okay.
Unanimously approved. Our next meeting is on September 10th. Do we have any committee reports? Representative?
What? Sorry?
Any reports from representatives?
I went to the council meetings this last week, and I think they're already summarized well by Hillary, so I have nothing else to add for that.
So, meeting adjourned at 9:50.